The Giants had quite the exciting offseason. And fortunately for Giants fans, historically speaking, no team has ever drafted a lineman and a pass rusher inside the top 10 and ended up regretting it. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 27 team in my preseason power rankings. Today, we will take a deep dive into the new look New York Giants. I think this 27 ranking is going to come in as a disappointment to some Giants fans. There are some aspects of this team that I certainly have my questions about, but we are entering a portion of these rankings now of teams that certainly can surprise if a lot of the things we talk about here in today's video do go right. So I'm very excited to get into it here. Please do, if you've enjoyed this series, if you enjoyed today's video, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss any of these deep dives as we lead up to the number one team in my power rankings. And lastly, do not go anywhere. We have a guest interview at the end of this show. Friend of the channel, Bengal, makes his return to the Giants deep dive, an interview you are not going to want to miss. But without further ado, let's begin. And as we do in this series, we go through every aspect of the team, through the coaching staff, through every position group with the roster, and we begin every segment there, taking a look at their offseason changes at that spot and asking the big question of, did they get better, did they get worse, or did they stay the same? And as we begin with this entire new regime with the Giants coaching staff, I had a hard time answering that question. It's very much to me to be determined, and I actually just coded it in yellow there in the graphic saying it's very different, certainly a stylistic difference going from a very kind of gung-ho and offensive-minded head coach that was a little more volatile in his approach, to say the least, in Brian Daboll, to, I would say, about the most conservative, safest hire that the Giants could have made in the floor-raising John Harbaugh, who doesn't call plays, isn't an offensive guy, isn't a defensive guy, isn't even really like a rah-rah guy, but he's got what so many people are after. He's got a good career winning percentage and a Super Bowl ring from like 15 years ago. And frankly, I've got a lot to talk about with this coaching staff. I've got thoughts on the direction the Giants are going here. We're going to get into the schemes on both sides of the ball. You name it. Let's try to keep things structured and focused here on just what the changes were this offseason, first and foremost. So yes, out with all things Brian Daboll. I'm excited to see what he can do in Tennessee. It was probably time here, though, for someone that I have defended over the years, and I've started to kind of go at it with Giants fans because I get it. You know, he is, like I said, a volatile figure as a head coach, kind of a big ego, his way or the highway type of guy. And they ended up parting ways with him before the end of the season last year. They also had fired Shane Bowen, so we're going to see really everything out here, including the defensive side of things. But Mike Kafka, who stepped in as the interim head coach, heads to Detroit. They're changing special teams coaches with Michael Gobriel out, and all the way down to, and I don't highlight every position coach necessarily. This is kind of a unique situation where there's some bigger name position coaches that need to be mentioned with this staff, and anytime Harbaugh is hired as your head coach, he is a coach that really is only as good as his staff, so we're definitely going to highlight some of these bigger name coaches in and out of the staff. And Carmen Bricillo, the offensive line coach, who I really praised when the Giants were able to land him coming over from the Raiders. And I think Bricillo did an excellent job with this Giants offensive line that has struggled so much over the years. Felt like last year we finally saw them get an offensive line that was at least workable, if not pretty good in moments. And he leaves. He follows Daboll to Tennessee. And it sounds like Bricillo was not Harbaugh's first choice. They tried to keep the door open to retain him, but after Harbaugh struck out on George Warhop, who followed Todd Monken from Baltimore to Cleveland, Monken, another guy Harbaugh struck out with in terms of building this staff, right around that time, Bricillo said, I'm out. I'm going to Tennessee. I'm following Brian Daboll. And then they end up, in many ways, going to plan C with Mike Bloomgren. So that's definitely something worth noting is Are the Giants going to get the same level of offensive line coaching, especially with the loss of Carmen Brasillo, who at this point I would say his resume with what he did with the Raiders, what he's done here, he's an excellent offensive line coach, probably at worst a top 10 O-line coach in the league, probably pushing top 5 in terms of offensive line coaches that come to the forefront of my mind with that spot. So that's a big loss as well. Now, when you look at the additions, like I said, Harbaugh is only as good as his staff. He doesn't call the plays. He's not really his brother. He's not, a Dan Campbell, rah-rah, light up the locker room type. Very even-keeled, and what Harbaugh is supposed to bring to the table is staff building. And I think it's extremely notable that really across the board, the Giants didn't get that incredible staff that you were certainly hoping for as a Giants fan or as someone that wants to see this Giants team succeed. When they hired Harbaugh, I had my speculation, but I was like, well, at least they'll probably get Todd Monken and maybe Anthony Weaver up from Miami, two guys that Harbaugh had under him in Baltimore. And no, they end up landing with Matt Nagy as the offensive coach after the Chiefs didn't retain him. Got some noise as a head coach candidate, wasn't taken overly seriously by the league itself. Obviously a failed head coach himself with his regime in Chicago. Not exactly a lot of buzz with Matt Nagy coming in as the offensive coordinator when a lot of people thought Todd Monken, who's of course the Browns head coach now, was going to be the offensive coordinator here. So hard to call that a huge win for the Giants in terms of how things shook down. They do have some other notable names in the building. It's very much a many chefs in the kitchen approach. We'll see if it ends up being too many chefs in the kitchen or if this is a good approach to have just a bunch of guys that have done it at the highest rankings in the past. You have Brian Callahan, another very much failed head coach. A big name, certainly, but still a lot to prove when really the majority of his success has come being Joe Burrow's quarterback coach. Kind of reminds me of a lot of the coaches that were elevated by having like Aaron Rodgers in the room that went and got a bunch of opportunities and then failed. We'll see if Callahan can bounce back here, getting to work with Jackson Dart as not just the quarterback's coach, but the passing game coordinator. And then Greg Roman's also in the building. He doesn't have a very large title, but that's a very big name, and Harbaugh loves him some Greg Roman. I look at this as very much a team effort, a three-pronged approach of trying to build this offense together, and there is some potential there, right? Matt Nagy in a rebound opportunity after really only having Mitch Trubisky to work with when it was him alone in Chicago. Brian Callahan has ascended the ranks of being a head coach, has been in charge of some good passing games at times, and Greg Roman, for all of his flaws, is awesome at designing a run game. So there's a world where you put those three together and create good offensive coaching out of it, but hard to be overly optimistic about that as a staff on the offensive side. They do end up with Denard Wilson as the defensive coordinator. Decent enough hire, is a part of that Mike Macdonald coaching system, but probably at the bottom of the list in terms of candidates to come in and implement that system. Again, Anthony Weaver, I think, was their top choice, and he actually goes back to Baltimore to reunite with Jesse Minner. And then, changing special teams coordinator as well with Chris Horton. So a lot of shakeup there, a big list of changes to begin the video there. Again, I'm not going to say it's downgraded necessarily. As big of a fan of Brian Daboll as I am, there was some stuff going on there. I just said it's very different, much more of a even keel, we've done this before, kind of let's raise the culture and professionalism of this organization, as opposed to like some of that's missing with Brian Daboll, but man, can he call some plays, right? Like very different approaches. Only time will tell if this can prove to be the right hire for the Giants, but even saying that makes me lower on the John Harbaugh hire. I've felt like I'm on an island this entire offseason saying like, I don't know, man. I don't think Harbaugh was anywhere close to my top list of favorite candidates for head coach hires this offseason. I think things really got stale in Baltimore. I've already hinted at the fact that he doesn't call plays. He's not his brother. I think there's so much, whether it's the hype or the way people talk about John Harbaugh, or even reflected in this team's over-under, this idea that you hire a Harbaugh and your team's automatically going to win. Yes, we've seen that with Jim. John has been the beneficiary of, for a long time, an excellent front office, one of the most well-respected organizations in the league, and a lot of really good coordinators underneath him. And yes, he's been a part of building that over time in Baltimore, but he did show that he's had a hard time sustaining it over the last 3-4 years. And the Giants have a lot more organizational dysfunction than what was in the infrastructure in Baltimore. I'm not saying Harbaugh cannot do it, but he's going to have his hands full trying to recreate what he had in Baltimore here with the New York Giants. Now, that's not to say I don't think he brings some of what he gets credit for to the table, and that is reflected in the rankings. It's not like I have Harbaugh ranked at the very bottom of my head coaches in the league. I rank him as the 22nd head coach in the league. Still a high floor, solid head coach. I don't want to just say he's horrible, but I do, like, when I'm hiring a head coach, I want to swing a little bit bigger, and that's where a lot of the pessimism comes in with how I talk about Harbaugh. But you will see that overall coaching culture ranking, that is sort of the team culture benefit of the doubt slider. It's not unbelievable with John Harbaugh coming in here, but it is very good. A B grade there, ranking 16th to 21st, which is probably higher than the Giants have been since I've been doing these deep dives. Maybe after that one Brian Dable year, they were around that mark, but you're going to get at least some benefit of the doubt that John Harbaugh has done this before, that he knows what he's doing, that he can raise the floor to an extent. I just question quite what extent we're talking about here. I just want to reiterate the point that, like, this isn't Jim Harbaugh coming in and getting an organization all fired up. This isn't Dan Campbell with a message of kneecap biting and at this point, establishing that he can really get a team behind his vision. Harbaugh has kind of lost the Baltimore Ravens. He's much more of I would compare it to more of like a pastor, like a pastoral, if that's a word. He's just much more like even keel, and like even some, like he had an offseason interview where after one of the many Ravens disappointing seasons came to a close, he had an offseason interview. It's like, it's not really about winning the whole thing. It's about the journey. And it's like, I get what you're saying, but when you're in a locker room and you have Lamar Jackson and everybody expects you to win a Super Bowl, you don't say that. And you're coming into an organization here that's kind of chaotic in terms of environment, personalities, New York media, New York expectations. I've got my questions, man. I really, really do. And I'm going to try not to beat a dead horse with that. We're going to conclude the John Harbaugh conversation of it all right there. But we'll see how this goes and if he can be what everybody thinks he is, which is ultimately his brother, who I just think is a much better coach, man. I do. But we're not done. We got to dive into these coordinators, what I think of the hires, and ultimately what this team's going to look like schematically speaking as well. That's obviously super important here. So let's start on offense with Matt Nagy. I'm skeptical, but I will keep an open mind. I have said that I think he probably should get another crack at this thing. It's always hard with these Chiefs offensive coaches, whether it's Matt Nagy here or, we said the same thing about Eric Bieniemy for years. It's like, how much credit should he get, really, when Patrick Mahomes is in the building? Andy Reid is the prominent offensive mind. For years, they had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in his prime. And honestly, since Matt Nagy has ascended the ranks, and it's funny enough that Bieniemy has found his way back to Kansas City after a journey of his own, things got worse the higher Matt Nagy got in the pecking order there, and it certainly is not encouraging that the Chiefs just didn't renew him. They just didn't want him back. I think that's the most damning thing you could say about why I'm not super excited about Matt Nagy right there. But he has done this for a long time and has quite the resume, a former head coach that did oversee some good Bears teams that was primarily centered around that defense. But you got to remember, like, he had Mitch Trubisky and a young Mitch Trubisky. And no, he didn't do a good job developing him or catering to his skill sets. And that's damning of Matt Nagy. But Mitch Trubisky was never a good pick at quarterback either. And this is an opportunity, hopefully, for Matt Nagy to show, and hopefully Jackson Dart is more of that guy, that if you give him a QB that can actually run an offense to a decent level, Matt Nagy can put the right plays in place. So I'm curious to see how he does. I'll leave it at that. Obviously, he's not going to come in ranking terribly high. Actually, I don't have the Giants at large at the very bottom of my offensive coach rankings. They come in with C+ grades, so nothing special, but actually 24th to 28th, both for pass game coaching and run game coaching. And that comes back to what we said earlier. It's not just Matt Nagy here. He's obviously highlighted on the graphic, but you do have Brian Callahan in the building, who, like I said, has questions about how good of a coach he is at this point after how horrible things went in Tennessee. But he does still get credit for really uplifting Zach Taylor in Cincinnati. You go back to, I think it was 2024 season, where Callahan really took over and implemented more of an Andy Reid kind of spread style passing game that was not a part of Zach Taylor's background, coming from more of that Shanahan style concept. So that's very consistent with how Matt Nagy runs his offense, and we'll continue to break this down as we talk. But I think it's still overall a good thing that Callahan is in here. And then you have Greg Roman as well. Like, I can't rank any team that has Greg Roman in the building dead last for run game coaching. As bad as the Chiefs' run game has been, with Matt Nagy being the offensive coordinator there, Greg Roman is one of the prominent run designers in the league. So he's in the building there as well. He's going to be able to draw some stuff up and provide some feedback on what's working, what's not working at the very least. If not, see a larger, like right now he's just listed as an offensive assistant. But I would imagine if things aren't going well, they're gonna listen to him more and more. So there's some experienced minds in the building. Like I said, it could work, or it could be a too many chefs in the kitchen with a lot of big egos. I think that could go one of two ways there. As far as the scheme is concerned, I do like how this team's going to look schematically speaking, and I really like how it's a fit with kind of how the offense is constructed, with Jackson Dart being such a big impact in the designed run game. I anticipate, very much that Andy Reid's modern pro spread style approach, which is a departure from so many of these Shanahan style offenses we talk about. Much more working from the gun, your 2x2 spread formations, even 3x1 formations, where you're trying to isolate some sort of mismatch problem on the one wide receiver side, whether it's an Isaiah Likely being in the Travis Kelce role in those formations, or if you just want to put teams in a bind, if they're double teaming Malik Neighbors, God willing he gets healthy, you say, and like the Packers did this all the time, stealing this kind of spread philosophy when it was just Devontae Adams in Green Bay, but sticking Neighbors on one side and say, all right, if you're going to double him, you're going to leave a lot of space and a big numbers problem with the rest of the offense working to one side of the other side of the field. So I anticipate their drop back game leans into a lot of that. I expect a lot of RPOs. The Chiefs have probably been maybe behind Miami, the most prominent RPO team over the last 3-4 years, and I think that's good here. Jackson Dart ran a ton of RPOs at Ole Miss, like too many RPOs at Ole Miss, but he'll be comfortable there. And then, again, bringing in the Greg Roman aspect, look at what he did with the young Lamar Jackson, right? Like, you're going to see them being able to tap into the design run game from the gun in a lot of different creative ways. Schematically speaking, it does all make sense for me. I just don't know if the names are necessarily the guys I'm getting the most excited about. And that's not to say they won't ever get under center and be heavy personnel. That's going to be a part of things as well. Trying to find that right balance in a nice, modern pro spread system. So I do have good things to say about at least the playbook and what things are going to look like that way. But we got to talk defense here. So they end up with Denard Wilson as the defensive coordinator. Denard Wilson was a part of that mass exodus from Baltimore which was really the beginning of the end for John Harbaugh, was when he lost Mike Macdonald, Anthony Weaver, and Denard Wilson in one offseason. But we've seen basically the Mike Macdonald system, which I would describe as the modern meta around the NFL right now, was founded in Baltimore and then kind of departed around the league. And I feel like Seattle and the Chargers are more of where we talk about that system really shining and getting the rest of the league trying to replicate a lot of those concepts. But it did all start in Baltimore, and I would say Denard Wilson was pretty low on that pecking order. He was their defensive backs coach, but teams were just looking to pluck anybody that had been in the building with Mike Macdonald. And it's not that Denard Wilson wasn't worthy of getting a defensive coordinator position. He's been around. He's coached under some other big names as well, including Jeff Fisher and Greg Williams, going all the way back to the beginning of his coaching career. Todd Bowles with the Jets. That's more very valuable experience. And then he was with Jonathan Gannon as well, running that Vic Fangio system in Philadelphia. He really had only spent 1 year next to Mike Macdonald, actually. And maybe that has put a little bit of pressure on him to run a system that maybe he isn't fully up to speed with. But again, I don't hate Denard Wilson. He comes right in that tier of still just like unproven but qualified defensive coaches. It was a decent fallback to get Denard Wilson. Again, I think higher of Anthony Weaver, who I think, you compare those two guys, I think are going to be forever attached because they were both coaches underneath Macdonald that left at the same time and then were asked to run the Mike Macdonald system. I do think Anthony Weaver did a lot more with maybe like arguably less in Miami, and Weaver always had a better resume to me than Denard Wilson. Whereas the Titans defense has been okay, but pretty lackluster. We haven't spent a lot of time over the last 2 years where Denard Wilson has been running that Titans defense saying, wow, what a great job he's doing elevating that defense. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on him to prove that he can do that here. We'll see how it goes. I want to talk about the Mike Macdonald system. This is actually the first deep dive so far that we have a coach that is going to be a true Mike Macdonald system. And we started talking about it so much in like last year's deep dive series that I actually prepared like a little slideshow style preparation of how to break this system down. So with, in honor of it being our first Macdonald defense in the series, let's bring those back and rehash those talking points. So there's really 4 things that really come to my mind on why this defense has been so successful and tried to be replicated around the league. First and foremost is it is one of these popular split safety defenses. You hear so much talk about the rise of too high and the concept of split safety defenses. And that's all derived from the success that Vic Fangio has had in the modern NFL. Nick Saban as well really popularized this at the college level with what you hear called Sabanese. And that's relevant because Mike Macdonald did spend some time at the college level working with college kids and that kind of stuff. And honestly, at the end of the day, from a coverage perspective, it's all within the same family. The Mike Macdonald defense, in many ways, is just an extension of a Fangio system with some newer ideas. So you are going to see a defense here with the Giants that is a very zone-heavy defense with that idea of we're going to start in 2 high structures, and we could end up in any sort of zone coverage, creating that post-snap confusion. Naturally, you're going to run a decent amount of cover 3 because it's a very good sound zone coverage. So you're going to have some of those safeties buzzing down and someone rotating into a single high look. But cover 4, cover 6, you can see it on the graphic there. Tennessee, for example, with Denard Wilson was 10th in cover 6 usage, 6th in cover 4. That's very consistent with these Mike Macdonald coaches. And I would just say one thing that the Macdonald system has really done and learned over the years is, when we first saw the influx of all these Fangio coaches into the league, whether it was Joe Barry or was it Ed Donatel for the Vikings, I think Brandon Staley had this problem for a long time. was this idea that we can just come out in quarters and everything's going to be fine. We don't have to press. We don't have to adapt to the situation. It feels like all these coaches in the Mike Macdonald system, and certainly Mike Macdonald himself, has put an emphasis on no, we still will press from cover 4 in the appropriate situation if we can find the right matchup with a cornerback. A lot of teams don't like to press from cover 4 because you actually, more often than not, will not have safety help over the top. It's kind of the equivalent of running cover 0 for your cornerbacks, just without the blitzing element. So it can be risky, but understanding that you don't want to just give those free outlets into the flat and let teams just nickel and dime you all day. Your defense is going to get exhausted and eventually your team's going to get worn down. It does feel like Mike Macdonald and the coaches underneath him have taken a look at that being a weakness in the Vic Fangio system and done a good job to not let that happen all the time. So that's kind of your coverage focus with this system. And then you have the really ascending idea that has only become more of a prominent concept since I created this little list for this system last offseason, is the use of 3 safety big nickel defenses. Now, I'll keep this one a little bit shorter here because I don't know that the Giants necessarily are going to do that. We didn't see a ton of it with the Titans last year. And as we'll see later, it's probably not how this defense is constructed, at least currently, but maybe something to keep an eye on for future seasons of the Giants, team building future. And maybe things do play out that they want to go this route this year as well. Maybe they want Javon Holland or something to play that big nickel. But this is the idea that, again, a big issue with these Fangio defenses, and Vic Fangio himself learned this putting Cooper DeJean in the nickel, is that if you're going to be a pre-snap 2-shell team, it's going to be hard to be a team that comes out in a traditional base defense where you only have 4 defensive backs on the field, a base 3-4 or a 4-3 defense. And that's because you're ultimately going to end up with a big man in coverage if you want to run cover 4. And that's where we saw, infamously, Joe Barry ended up with, Preston Smith and coverage on Justin Jefferson against the Vikings. So you want to be a base nickel defense, but the problem with that is your traditional nickel corners. If you go back, 10 years ago, the average nickel corner was probably 5'10", 195 pounds. That guy's going to get bodied against the run if you're trying to play base nickel too high defenses where you have lighter boxes naturally. That slot corner is going to be put in a tough spot. So we've seen so many defenses around the league getting bigger in the nickel, someone that can act as a quasi linebacker, but also athletic enough to cover. It's been a huge success for teams that run this defense, whether it's Kyle Hamilton in that role initially, Nicky Manwari last year for Seattle, Derwin James responding in that role for the Chargers. Again, I don't know who that guy necessarily is on this Giants team, but it's very much in the family in terms of scheme and something to keep an eye out for. And then the third point on the Mike Macdonald defense is probably the most innovative thing that Mike Macdonald has really brought to the table that these coordinators have been tasked with replicating, is really flipping how NFL teams have traditionally instructed their playbook and taught their front 5 the rules of the plays, flipping how it's taught on its head. Instead of here's all of our formations, here's all the blitzes in those formations, and here's what you need to know from your position for all of those plays, it's condensing that playbook really in many ways, especially for their blitz packages, eliminating the idea of formational play calling and saying we're running this blitz, but here's where you're going to line up. So you ultimately have to learn, a quarter less of the plays that are going to get called, but they teach those plays to every member of the D-line from all 5 spots. There's a great video of Mike Macdonald explaining this and how he coaches it, where they literally just set up 5 chairs, he calls the play, and then they just keep rotating until everybody gets it. And I would say it's loosely easier for players to understand it. It's still a lot to handle from a mental point of view. But what this really unlocks from a schematic point of view is you're able to have your defense and your blitz packages especially, where they love to just line up 5 guys up front, whether it's a blitzing linebacker or what we'll probably see here in New York with all these edge rushers, taking an Abdul Carter or Brian Burns and lining them up over the center, but you're ultimately going to have a 5-man rushing front. But you're able to call any blitz. The entire D-line is going to be comfortable with it no matter what. And most importantly, teams don't know what the hell is coming. In the old way, when you coach things by formation, you would be able to look at it and be like, when it's 3rd and 8, the Giants like to come out in this formation, and here's the 3 blitzes they like to run out of it. This way, it's their formation is completely chaotic. We can't find any tendencies with when guys are lining up, where they are, and what blitzes are actually coming at us in those situations because it all looks the same. And you ultimately end up with total clarity in terms of what blitzes you're running on your side of things as the defense, while the offense doesn't have that proper preparation, and that's why it's so effective. So that's absolutely something that's going to play here and something to get excited with when you talk about Arvell Reese coming in here and all these different pass rushers that they have here. This scheme and the way they design their blitzes is the reason they're able to just load up this edge room and say it doesn't matter, we'll make it work. And then the last point I have on this system kind of ties into number 3 there, but it's the efficiency of the blitz. Most of these Mike Macdonald teams aren't actually, even though we spend so much time talking about how good they are at blitzing, they, for the most part, have been bottom 10 in terms of blitz rate. Last year, Tennessee, Baltimore, the Chargers, Seattle, for example, were all bottom 12 in just total blitz rate. Miami got a little more crazy with Anthony Weaver down there, but that doesn't mean these teams aren't showing blitzes and putting the fear into the opponent that by mugging up linebackers into the gap, moving guys around, showing a lot of these amoeba fronts, really, and moving fronts, putting the fear that that blitz could be coming at any given moment, maybe force the team to keep an extra man in protection, or you create a incorrect slide towards someone that's showing blitz that's actually going to drop into coverage, and you end up rushing 4, but actually getting some of that phantom pressure from the way that the line slid, and just the overall efficiency of how they look at the blitz. Even if you're not blitzing a lot, when they do, it is having really good designs, using stunts, using pre-snap formations to create that phantom pressure. And when you don't blitz, the offense thinks you might be blitzing anyway. So that's what this Macdonald defense looks like. That won't be the first time in this deep dive series that we break things down like that, but I know a lot of you guys enjoy those schematic deep dives inside the deep dives, and Giants fans, because it is relatively new for you as a fan watching this defense, I hope that helps you come a little more equipped for what your team is doing and looking to accomplish there. So the scheme is proven successful around the league. It's just now in Denard Wilson's hands to prove that he can properly implement that here with the Giants. But next up, I'm excited to get into this roster, start breaking things down. Before we do that, another thing I'm looking forward to getting into is the World Cup this summer. And Prize Picks is here to make watching those games even more interesting. With Prize Picks lineups, you pick any number of individual player stats. So in this case, we're talking goals, assists, keep you glued to your seat all the way down to tracking the amount of passes these guys are attempting. And with team picks now available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida, you can pick the winner of these games as well. And it's not just the World Cup. Baseball's in full swing, basketball, hockey, playoffs, so many sporting events, all the way down to UFC Freedom 250 this weekend. It might not be football season, but it's still a good time to be a sports fan this time of year. And Prize Picks is here to make these games all the more interesting and give you a chance to win some big money as well. So right now, if you sign up using code HMA, you'll also get $50 in bonus lineups when you play your first $5. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy, and please do play responsibly as well. Thanks to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's deep dive, and let's now get into this roster breakdown. We will begin at quarterback. As far as the offseason changes, can keep it quick. Staying neutral, the only loss here is Russell Wilson, who retires after an incredible career. Going to make for some fun Hall of Fame debates. Let me know in the comments down below. Russell Wilson, first ballot Hall of Famer, fringe Hall of Famer, one of those interesting players. But let's focus on the Giants here, and it's a big conversation to be had here as well with quarterback, with Jackson Dart coming off of a really encouraging rookie season. Was one of those picks that nobody really knew how this was going to go. He was, I would just say, a polarizing prospect to say the least, and certainly not some consensus top 10 pick, and that's why he ends up going at the end of the first round. He had an okay college career by NFL prospects standards and an inconsistent college career as well. Just kind of came in as a little bit of an unknown traitsy quarterback, and the Giants rolled the dice on him, and it was kind of Brian Daboll's parting gift here, because it kind of feels like Brian Daboll was right. At the very least, you watch Jackson Dart and you see a guy that has everything to get him on the right track towards being a legitimately good franchise quarterback, maybe even a great game-changing quarterback because of the arm talent. Some of the improvisational skills and the playmaking that he showed last year really wasn't so prominent in his college tape. I would say that is where Dart surprised the most, was just how much he was able to cook up out of structure and how good he was in the run game and as a scrambler as well, of course. But seeing some of those throwing windows down the field, those instincts, really impressive stuff in terms of high-end plays from Jackson Dart, and that's what gets people so excited about him, man. But as with any quarterback, that needs to be the cherry on top, right? You need consistency. You need to raise the floor with how you operate the structure and take care of the football. And in Jackson Dart's case, take care of your body as well. He's raised a lot of concerns with his floor getting cut out from underneath him because of injury risks. Just trucking into defenders, not sliding, not getting out of bounds. That young, reckless mentality that unfortunately has led to the early demise of too many quarterbacks. And Dart has to take care of his body on top of everything we talk about here, and that has to bake into the conversation with him. That's much more cut and dry. But when you get back to like the in-structure stuff with Jackson Dart, being a more consistent passer, that's what has to come along here in year 2 and beyond. The good thing is that there are some really impressive NFL moments from Jackson Dart in structure. Whether it's progressing through reads or honestly, some of the way he broke down like post-snap safety rotations, dealing with a lot of these two-shell, Fangio, McDonald concepts where you're showing one coverage pre-snap, rotating into something else. I think he sees things quickly enough to make some of those high-level decisions, and he makes some of those throws throughout the course of the season where you're like, man, that was really impressive that he even thought to attempt that pass. Challenging, tight throwing windows that so many quarterbacks either don't see or choose not to challenge. Now, you are going to have to deal with, especially for a young version of Jackson Dart, how often is he putting the ball in harm's way? How often is he not seeing defenders rotating into those areas that he thinks are open? Finding that right balance of being that aggressive decision maker without being a turnover machine. How well he finds that balance is going to be critical. I mean, he was towards the uncomfortable end of turnover-worthy mistakes. He got away with it a good bit with interceptions not being converted, but Dart did finish last season 19th out of 26 of eligible quarterbacks in terms of turnover-worthy play percentage just as a passer. So you love that he's not afraid to make tough throws, elevate the offense through the structure, not just out of structure. But again, gotta find that right balance. That's very straightforward. You need to see just standard development for a young quarterback in terms of processing, decision-making, footwork, that kind of stuff. You would say that about any young quarterback. And then the other thing with Dart that is probably my biggest concern, which partially ties into the taking too many hits and can he stay on the field, is his pocket presence. It's not what I remember watching at Ole Miss, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. But it's erratic, it's volatile, and it's it's good one play, bad the next. He took way too many sacks as well. Again, it's not just the idea of him not sliding and taking defenders on. He, a lot of the times, did not navigate the pocket appropriately. He invited a lot of sacks by either drifting back too far in the pocket, not understanding that he just needs to step up to seal off those angles, or just not understanding that a play is dead, to live for the next play. That kind of like aggressive YOLO mentality bakes into his entire game, and his pocket movement decision making is totally a part of that. So he takes a lot of bad sacks. He can, end up in a 2nd and 20 instead of a 2nd and 10 a little bit too often. You're going to be vulnerable to strip sacks and guys hitting you from behind that you don't see coming, because when he's as reckless in the pocket as he is. But it again comes back to finding that right balance, because I mentioned it wasn't what I remember seeing at Ole Miss. I thought he just had straight up horrible, unsavable pocket presence. I compared him to Derek Carr because of that reason when he came out. I don't think it's unsalvageable. I really do think if you just teach him to step up a little bit more and understand that some of these plays are dead and you need to throw the ball away a little bit more, you're going to end up on the good side of pocket presence a lot more often, because it's not all negative with Dart. There are a lot of examples on tape of him actually seeing these chaotic pockets break down, understanding how to get out of the pocket and navigate, muddy pockets and different pressures from different angles. That kind of eye in the back of his head, he had it at times, and then because he was kind of discovering that he's actually pretty good at it at times, it led to some moments where he can't get away with that kind of stuff. So it is all about balance and development with Jackson Dart. I do still think we're talking about a quarterback that has a lot to prove, and a good bit in terms of ranking these quarterbacks, a good bit still to climb. I have Jackson Dart as the 26th overall quarterback as we head into this season. I always remind people, this series is what have you proven, what's established, ranking these players and teams much closer to their floor as we head into the year. You do see that green up arrow on Jackson Dart. I do hope that he can finish and develop much better than this ranking, and I think there's reasonable hope that he can and will do that, especially if he's able to take care of his body and stay on the field. I did go back and watched a few Jackson Dart games before this video, just to kind of re-cement my opinion, having mostly watched his stuff through the broadcasts and stuff last year. And I will say I'm more optimistic on Jackson Dart now than I thought I was before that film watch. So there is a lot to like. You just need to find somewhere that consistency, and that's going to be the standard opinion on Jackson Dart. Whether you take more of a leap of faith and say he's more of the 22nd best quarterback in the league right now, or you're a little bit more pessimistic and say he's 30th, it really doesn't even matter. It's more just what does he show us here in a big second season. And he is actually going to come in ranked 30th just from the passing grade, but it is certainly worth noting to wrap up this conversation that what he brings to the table as a designed runner is impactful in a big way, and it's enough to take what I view as the 30th best passing quarterback in the league and say, no, this is actually the 26th best quarterback in the league, lifts him up above a few other guys, because that does matter. It's going to show up in terms of the Giants projecting as a little bit more of a good running game. And when you're able to run the ball, it takes a good amount of pressure off of you as a passer as well. And that's not even including what he's able to do creating with his legs as a scrambler as well. So the Giants actually rank in a tier 4th to 6th in terms of run game impact from the quarterback, which can be super underrated at times, especially when Greg Roman is in the building. So that should be a fun aspect of this as well. But got to be careful with it. And he's got to be careful with it, sliding, getting out of bounds more often, not taking those unnecessary hits. Not going to spend a whole lot of time here on Jameis Winston. Very fun backup. Interesting that he's in the building in Jackson Dart's mind. If I'm trying to teach Jackson Dart to maybe hone it in a little bit and find more of a balance in terms of aggressive decision-making, I don't know that Jameis Winston as the clipboard holder and the veteran voice in the room is the best idea. Hopefully it's nothing. I think Jameis Winston's a ton of fun. but he might be egging Jackson Dart on a little bit. And then you got Brandon Allen there as well, who's started probably more games than Brandon Allen should have started at this point in his career. So there is your Giants quarterback room. It is not controversial to say that this is one of, if not the biggest wild card pivotal factors for this Giants team this season. And I'm just excited to see how things go with Jackson Dart. But let's move on and get into the running back room. And in terms of offseason changes, the Giants liked what they saw from Cam Skattebo because they did not add anybody. They didn't really lose anybody. Really, the only addition is Cam Skattebo, who goes down with that broken leg about a third of the way through the season. So 26% of snaps played for Skattebo. They're hoping to get a good bit more from that this year, as there's a lot of reason to be excited about Cam Skattebo here. Still a lot to prove. Has that up arrow on there on Skattebo. I've got the Giants ranking 21st to 27th in a league full of good running back rooms. So they're more than good enough, I think, with room to improve as far as the ranking is concerned. But man, I don't really have a negative word to say about Skattebo other than, like, I guess he's not that fast and maybe will never break through into that top elite tier of like top 5 backs in the league. But I think he's phenomenal, man. I loved him as a prospect coming out. Thought he was one of the steals of the draft. I'm proud to say he was my RB4 in last year's draft. Feel like those RB rankings have aged pretty well for me. And honestly, man, if he didn't get hurt, he might have won Offensive Rookie of the Year. We might be talking about him as the best running back out of last year's draft, at least early on. He was that good. He broke so many tackles. He proved that he has legit NFL power to bowl through guys, to fight for tough yards. And he just had that it factor as a player that was hard to quantify. I can't remember all the analogies I used with him in draft season, but basically, like, however tough you think your favorite player is, he's not as tough as Cam Skattebo. I know I dubbed him the Tasmanian Sun Devil, having played at Arizona State, and I don't know that that's stuck necessarily. Maybe we can still, get that going as a nickname for him. But it's true, dude. Like, he just plays out of his mind crazy, and it just shows on the field in terms of getting those bonus yards that a lot of running backs just aren't able to get. And it's not just that this guy's crazy. Like, he clearly takes care of, well, he puts in time in the weight room. Like, he is that brick shithouse build, which gives him raw, natural power. But what really allows him to be as effective as he is something I didn't think got enough credit for as a prospect. And the main reason I liked him so much, light feet. For such a rocked up, powerful player, he has exceptionally light feet. And even if you wouldn't consider him like a Jeremiah Love or this ultra shifty player, he will have some subtle, jump cuts and stuff and make guys miss in a traditional sense. But really where it shows up is he's so good at just these little subtle jab steps before tacklers get there. And it ensures that guys don't get all of him. They don't get the full hit box when they go to hit him. He'll just, have that little subtle elusiveness that helps him utilize that power and break tackles and get those bonus yards. It's a rare trait. And he's got excellent vision on top of it. He's great in the receiving game. Like, even if he's not super fast, I wouldn't describe Skattebo as a mismatch problem. Great hands, great instincts, good route runner. And I think in terms of pass blocking too, like, there's stuff to clean up in terms of technique and assignment, but he is very willing and could very well be like a legit 3-down dude. I don't know, man. I really hope he can stay healthy. I hope the broken leg was just a pure fluke. You're always going to be worried with guys that deal with so much contact and seek out as much contact as he is. Just that wear and tear on a running back, you're always going to have to worry about that. I'm not going to bring myself to call him injury prone quite yet. I'm going to stay optimistic on that front. That's honestly the worry. That, and yeah, he's maybe not dynamic enough to be Bijan Robinson or, those types of backs, but can he be Josh Jacobs, Maurice Jones-Drew, still very much a top 10 running back in the NFL? I'm not going to rule that out with him, especially if he's able to stay healthy. So I'm a huge fan, probably my favorite player on this Giants team. Really excited to see him back, and I'm just so happy that the Giants went elsewhere in terms of their offseason planning and saw the talent, and are going to hopefully put him in a position to thrive here. So that's exciting, and I definitely anticipate with some more, proven production from him, Giants can finish a good bit higher than this 21st to 27th ranked cluster that we have them at right now. But I think you can also understand, as much as I love him, he only played a quarter of his rookie season. There's a lot of good backs in the league. It's hard for them to come in too high at running back right now with how we do this series. But as far as the backups go, it's a very nice running back committee behind Scadaboo. Tyrone Tracy's a really nice role-playing running back. Infamously spent most of his college career as a wide receiver, switched to running back that final year, and really broke through. Got himself drafted here to the Giants, and he's proved to be, I would say, a productive, if not inconsistent back. I still think just there's something kind of missing with him, and I think it's probably just the fact that he's more of a career wide receiver still than a running back. You're starting to meet that middle, meeting of the roads in terms of has spent more time as a running back than as a receiver. But I still think, you could take the optimistic spin and say with more time at the position to develop, he's going to get more instincts and vision and creativity. Maybe. I still think he probably just is kind of missing a little bit of that, call it instincts, call it that it factor, whether it's knowing when and how to make guys miss. The vision does seem to be a little bit more hit or miss in terms of decisiveness and seeing lanes. He's fumbled a lot. He's dropped the football a lot, scattered throughout his career, was better at that this last season. All these things have kind of combined to contain Tracy as a very quality backup running back in the NFL. But, man, he is explosive. And there are plays where he shows some of that shiftiness out in space. And theoretically, he is a good receiving back. And I like that the hands got better this year because it was weird. He came into the league. It's like, oh, you should have great hands, right? You played wide receiver at Iowa for like 4 years or whatever it was. No, he had a bunch of drops early in his career, but clean that up a little bit. Still not much of a pass blocker, but he can just kind of be a change of pace back to Cam Scadaboo. Very different style. A little bit more speed and dynamism in that sense, and I like him here as the backup. And then they do still have Devin Singletary, obviously undersized, slow back that a lot of people are familiar with at this point, veteran. But as an RB3, sure, dude, give me Devin Singletary as an RB3 who can do a little bit of everything. That's perfectly fine. And then Eric Gray is still on this team who they drafted, feels like forever ago at this point. I would imagine they like what he does on special teams for them. So there's your RB room. I'm very optimistic that this ranking will, quote-unquote, age like milk. I'm just a huge Cam Scadaboo fan. Just got to keep him healthy and see a little bit more from him. And hopefully the rest of what we talk about with this surrounding infrastructure will allow him to really thrive. But let's continue that conversation and talk about the weapons here with the Giants, which is another pretty hefty conversation in terms of offseason changes. A lot of shakeup here, both at wide receiver and tight end. So only one real loss at wide receiver, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson, who had a nice year last year. But wow, Tennessee, $20 million a year for Wan'Dale Robinson. Okay, that's what we're going with there. Okay, I can't blame the Giants for saying goodbye to him on that end. And they bring in a bunch of different bodies, right? They draft Malachi Fields in the third round, more veterans, Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin, Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham Jr., very deep room. And those last two names especially make this interesting with Juju and Odell Beckham because they were just signed a couple of days ago after it's become a little bit more clear that Malik Neighbors' recovery from this ACL that happened week 4 last year, maybe week 5, it ain't going so hot. He just had another operation a few weeks ago. There was a clip of him in a softball game where he's really having a hard time moving. And it has now really been made a question of, like, when is Malik Neighbors really going to play this year? And what is he going to look like when he does? So it's easy to just put him in there as an addition and say, yep, this is massively upgraded. They get all these other guys and Malik Neighbors back healthy. That's the optimistic spin, and I'm not saying that can't be the case here this year. But there is a other side of the coin, I suppose, where this goes south and you don't get so much Malik Neighbors, and you can't really talk about him having this great comeback this year. That's why I can't even necessarily say that Jackson Dart is this team's biggest wild card, because Malik Neighbors' health might actually be that answer to that question. But I do still say upgraded. Wandale's a loss, but like they can replace that. I think we'll get Neighbors back at some point. And then they had some pretty impressive depth at this point with all these additions. And I liked Malachi Fields in the third round. So I do still say upgraded at wide receiver, so that's good. And then slightly upgraded at tight end as well. Two very different players. Daniel Bellinger, very underrated player. That was kind of a win on the channel, a deep cut of a win, where I said don't be surprised when Daniel Bellinger gets a 3-year, $20 million contract from someone, because he's a hell of a blocker and kind of an underrated player. And that's what happened. He follows Dable to Tennessee. So it is a loss losing Daniel Bellinger, that blocking presence in that tight end room. But they did bring in Isaiah Likely as more of a wide receiver than a tight end, honestly. And maybe that's part of calling wide receiver an upgrade, is I view Likely as half wide receiver, half tight end. But he's a nice player, if not slightly overpaid here, who will break down here. So again, I said slightly upgraded at tight end. But let's get into it. This is definitely a fascinating group of weapons, but a group that very much does hang on the balance of Malik Neighbors' injury and recovery, because this dude at full force came into the league and gave you legitimate reason to think that you are talking about a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson type of player someday. Still needs the proper infrastructure and established production to confidently say he is that. But he's insane. I literally do not have a bad word to say about Malik Neighbors as a football player. Loved him as a prospect. And, you know, I got some heat that year because I said Malik Neighbors is the second highest grade I've ever given a wide receiver, behind Marvin Harrison that year. Marv's a whole nother conversation that we already had with the Cardinals, but one of my big takes that year was like, don't let Marv have you lose sight of just how special Neighbors is. And God did that show in his rookie season, dude. Like, people just can't move like Malik Neighbors. He has that rare elite blend of, like, honestly, like, generational combination of speed, agility, change of direction, like acceleration, you name it. It's all in there with him to really as high as you could possibly conceive. Like, yes, there's some other guys that are faster than Malik Neighbors, but so many true speed guys can't decelerate, which is probably the most underrated movement skill for a wide receiver, to throttle down, change directions, warp your body against the guy trying to cover you, make adjustments to tough catches. It's just all so special, man. And he's got a great baseline of route running. He makes great catches. After the catch, this dude is unstoppable. There's just everything there. Devastating, to say the least, that he suffers that torn ACL, and devastating that it's taken so long to feel like he's going to be good to go. You just dream that they're taking all precautions and doing everything they can to make sure that he gets back 100% when he does. Hopefully that happens this year in November or whenever it is. We get into this conversation with Bengal as well in the interview, but needless to say, whether he's here or not is going to dramatically change how much you would rank this group of weapons, but more importantly, how good this offense is going to be, and even more importantly above that, how much these guys are able to help Jackson Dart. Because after Malik Neighbors, it might be the worst group of weapons in the league, or second worst behind Miami. It's really all question marks after that. You look at these wide receivers, and it's kind of the same conversation on like four of these dudes. Darius Slayton, inconsistent, aging veteran. Darnell Mooney, inconsistent, aging veteran. Calvin Austin, not that old yet, but inconsistent. Juju Smith-Schuster, pretty consistent, but definitely an aging veteran. Odell Beckham, aging veteran. You got a bunch of dudes that have done it. There's a certain floor related to that, and you can kind of filter through this and see who's in shape and who is a fit with the offense, who works well with Dart. Between the 5 of those names, you'll probably land with some adequate pass catchers, but certainly nothing to get overly excited about. And even if the floor is okay, you're probably talking about more bad than good with that combination of names. I want to just kind of go through those guys, just a quick snapshot on what these guys' skill sets are. Darius Slayton has been around. He's more of a vertical threat, doesn't provide much after the catch. He's that traditional vertical Z. I give a lot of pro comps to players to Darius Slayton for guys that best case scenario, he'll probably be the 4th best wide receiver on your team, but someone that can stretch the field and hopefully he catches the ball. But he has had painful inconsistency throughout his career in terms of just, is he going to catch it? You at least know on a macro scale what you can expect from him for the course of a season, but the frustrating thing with him is you don't know when you take the field any given Sunday what version of him you're going to get. And that's, I think, the core of so many frustrations Giants fans have with Darius Slayton. Honestly, Darnell Mooney is very much in a similar breath. Just has had so much inconsistency throughout his career and inconsistency with drops and hands. Mooney's a little bit more fluid as an athlete, provides a little bit more route running, maybe a little bit more shiftiness after the catch, but a similar idea.
I do have the yellow arrow on Mooney because he's had a couple seasons where he's been one of the better real number 2 wide receivers that you can be pretty damn happy with. I thought the first year in Atlanta was kind of a bargain for them, and then the inconsistency in the drops showed up. So there's a world where Darnell Mooney turns into a happy ending, nice signing, and fills in as a really nice complement in this group and maybe even overtakes Darius Slayton. Not necessarily counting on it, though, of course.
Calvin Austin, younger player, maybe didn't always have the best opportunities in Pittsburgh, but also has really never stabilized as a consistent presence of a passing game. Juju Smith-Schuster, much more different. Bigger bodied, physical guy, works more in the short to intermediate game, more often as a big slot. He's still shown that he can play, even if he's one of the slower options you could find on a football field in the NFL right now. He's dealt with a lot of injuries and was never that fast to begin with, but right place, right time, physical type of wide receiver. So he gives you a little bit of something different. Odell, I don't need to explain to Giants fans or really anybody. We I think understand that this is a player who's been completely derailed by injuries, and you're praying that this is not a predecessor to Malik Neighbors' career arc here. But yeah, Odell, still a skilled football player, but incredibly average from a physical traits standpoint, and durability has been an issue for him. Man, you got so many names in here. You got Isaiah Hodgins is in here. Big-bodied, great hands, but talk about slowest wide receivers you could have out there. Not a lot of separation or anything from him. I've always liked Isaiah Hodgins for what he is. We'll see if he makes this team. Braxton Berrios gets brought in probably as a punt returner. And Jalen Hyatt is still here as well. I think this is probably it for Jalen Hyatt. He's just so bad at football, but he's fast. So the one name at wide receiver I haven't named yet is the guy they invested in the draft, right? So you have Neighbors way up here in terms of hopes. You have this middle cluster of vets where it's floor raising, Band-Aid style fillers to your roster. And then you have Malachi Fields hanging out over here. It's okay, let's see what he can do. I liked Malachi Fields as a prospect, and I think best case scenario, what Fields could be in his best case situation paired with Malik Neighbors is ideal, because Fields is not fast. He's not a great route runner. He's never going to be someone you're happy with as the best wide receiver on your team. But as a prototypical X, as a run blocker, someone that provides size, someone that can be on a second read, working a CB2 on the boundary, a back shoulder threat or be the backside read on a dig where it's either you're trusting him to win a contested catch or you're giving him a little bit more time against zone coverage to get open as the secondary read when you're looking at Malik Neighbors first. All that plays perfectly great for Malachi Fields. If Neighbors can't get out there and Fields is getting a little bit more attention, you've got to force the ball to him a little bit earlier in the progression, you could end up a little bit underwhelmed. But I like the pick, and I like how he fits long-term as long as things go well with Neighbors' recovery. And then you look at that and say, all right, that can start to make sense. That can actually start to make a lot of sense where you have those two guys and then all these veterans kind of filter in and eventually you're moving guys in and out around Neighbors and Fields. All right, we can really work with that. So there's your wide receivers. And then you have to talk about Isaiah Likely as half wide receiver, half tight end. I don't know how it all shook down that we now have 4 deep dives in a row where we've had these sort of hybrid receiving entity. Brock Bowers, then Harold Fannin, then Kenyon Sadiq, and now Isaiah Likely. These guys are all in the same family of playmaker and in terms of usage as someone that is not going to be, or someone you should not ask to be, your actual starting Y tight end. It's going to be a liability for your run game. You're going to end up in way too many 2nd and 10s, 2nd and 11s, because Isaiah Likely can't block Rashawn Gary, Jonathan Grenard, whoever just in this division, let alone the entire NFL. Not in a traditional sense. And certainly not at 235, 240 pounds soaking wet like Isaiah Likely. What he can do is block from slot wide receiver, block as a flex tight end, where you're going to end up more with safeties and linebackers as you climb to the second level, as a fullback coming cross formation, or just if you are blocking a defensive end, you're coming cross formation with a little bit of momentum. All you got to do is get a hand on the guy and slow him down on some of those like split zone concepts. Likely can do that, but you can really only use him in that role if you have an actual inline tight end doing the dirty work. And then that also, not just from a blocking standpoint, opens up Isaiah Likely to do what he does so well as a wide receiver. And what he does as a wide receiver, and yes, as an inline tight end, on passing downs, that's fine. You're not asking him to block more often than not on 3rd and 8, right? Sure, you want to put his hand in the dirt next to the tight end because it's harder for the defense to account for him. Be my guest, right? But this dude is an absolute technician of a receiver. Great route runner. Some of the best, just like concentration, outstanding hands. Just, he's a football player, dude. Like his skill across the board is tremendous. And there's been some moments when Baltimore really leaned into him that he was like a difference-making pass catcher. I don't know that he's fully dynamic and impactful enough and consistent enough to project as like a real number 2 option for your passing game. But I do really see how he fits as well beneath Neighbors, in between him and Fields, as this kind of addition to the offense and this flex piece. And again, that all starts to tie together. That all hinges around Neighbors being Malik Neighbors. I don't think Fields can be the best version of himself without that legit alpha, number 1, attention-sucking wide receiver that Malik Neighbors is. And you're going to end up asking too much of Isaiah Likely if you have to consistently lean on him. But with Likely more as a consistent thorn in the opposing offense's side around all of this, whether it's putting some of that formational stress on defenses where you have to decide whether you want to match the Giants' 12 personnel in your base defense or in a nickel defense, or just with his play style being more of a short to intermediate impact and a nice run after catch threat, stressing defenses in that way. That's exactly what Isaiah Likely is good at. So certainly a good addition, and with Neighbors maybe being a little bit slower to get back and Fields being a rookie that might not be out there right away, Likely is a good chance, might even say he's likely, to actually lead this team in receiving yards this year, just depending on, obviously, when and how Neighbors gets back out there. But I mentioned you need a true inline Y tight end, and that is also what makes Theo Johnson so important to all of this and makes this season so important for Theo Johnson because he himself has a lot of potential to be a big part of this and what they're trying to build with the Giants. But the ball's in his court at this point. He has got to learn how to block more consistently. He's about 260 pounds. He has all the size and frame in the world, a Penn State tight end. A lot of times those guys are known for their blocking. It just has not been the case with Theo Johnson for one reason or another. While you might see some positive, impressive blocks for him, 3 times over, he's fallen off blocks, blown assignments, and just not being that consistent impact there. And that lack of consistency defines his game as a receiver as well because, dude, this guy is athletic. He has moved much better. I know he tested great, but that was kind of my draft take on him is at Penn State. I didn't see a guy that played as fast as he tested. I think in the NFL, he has shown the speed and the rare athletic ability that really got him drafted. And that's great. Like you see some really impressive big plays from him, some outstanding catches as well, going through traffic, using his frame. That was probably the best thing he did this year was convert 12 out of his 19 contested catch targets. But the drops, man, he's had 12 drops in his first 2 seasons on 115 targets. His drop rate is at 14%. That's one of the worst of any pass catcher in the league since he came into it. Like the inconsistent with him has been infuriating. So that's what makes year 3 so big for him. You know the potential is there. It's not just potential. The good plays are there, but it's about eliminating the bad plays and in turn getting good plays more often. So big year for him. I kind of believe at this point, he wasn't my favorite prospect, but I actually really like the kind of way that they've set this up with Likely coming in, not eliminating Theo Johnson from the offense, but clarifying his role, saying, look, you got to be more consistent as more of a possession style wide tight end. When it's 3rd and 4 and you're doing a check and release and we drop the ball off to you, you got to catch it. And also, we need to be able to lean on you and your size as a run blocker. Otherwise, you're going to take a seat and we're going to put this other veteran, Chris Manhertz, in here as well. Like they have clearly defined this, like this is what you're going to do for us, but it's a shit or get off the pot type of season for him. And I love putting that kind of pressure on people at the right spot in their career. And I think that's what we're talking about with Theo Johnson. So I'm keeping my eyes on him for sure in a big year for him. There's a great world where him and Isaiah Likely emerges as, I'm not going to say like the best tight end duo in the league or anything, but a really healthy on the field relationship between some really good complementary skill sets. And you can also project this thing out a little bit more too and be like, all right, if we're going to be more of a 12 personnel team or an 11 and a half personnel with Isaiah Likely being half tight end, half wide receiver, and we're looking at the future of this team and it's Neighbors and Fields and Likely and Johnson and Cam Scattaboo, yeah, that adds up in terms of finding complementary skill sets and building a proper group together. So, and then you filter in all these other, miscellaneous veteran types. Yeah, man, like we got a long ways to go before all of those pieces fall into place with how you're envisioning them here. But that absolutely plays for me and is something to get excited about as a Giants fan. In terms of additional depth, you do have Patrick Ricard here following Harbaugh over. Love that as a blocking fullback presence. That's going to be the Greg Roman of it all, getting into more 21 personnel, moving the fullback around. He'll be in the mix as a blocking presence, not a receiving presence, but he is one of the best blocking fullbacks in the league. So I'd rather he be here than he not be. And then a fun developmental piece in Thomas Fidone, kind of a straight line speed rack merchant coming out of Nebraska. Got the running backs there. They'll play their part as well. I think we had those guys pretty well covered. And between Tracy and Scattaboo, you got a perfectly reasonable combo of pass catchers out of the backfield. Singletary can do some stuff too. I think the B- grade, ranking 23rd to 27th with the wild card icon, is very par for the course with what we said here. I see the vision. I see how this group can really come together and make sense and be not just enough for Jackson Dart, but be a great unit that helps him thrive. But they got to go out and prove it and get her done. Now let's talk about the offensive line for the Giants. Another part of this team that is seeing a lot of turnover for the best in this case. I do say the offensive line is upgraded as well. So ultimately, you're hitting green lights other than play caller. You're hitting green lights with at least moderate upgrades at every spot, but definitely big upgrades with this offensive line. You have some losses, like Greg Van Roten actually played 100% all of their snaps last year, which is insane given his age. And he's also just a phone call away if things go south here. But he's not currently on the team. Austin Schlottman actually stepped in and gave them some good snaps at center last year. So those are moderate losses, but they spend that top 10 pick on Francis Maui-Noa. They draft J.C. Davis in the 6th round. They also add Lucas Patrick, a veteran that's been around the league, and Daniel Falele. Yet another Nepo baby addition to this Giants team to fill out their depth chart. But surprise, surprise, this is another unit that I like the future projection of, but still has a good bit to prove. Now, they do come in 18th to 19th for my offensive line ranking, so that's our highest ranked group for the Giants offense, at least. So that's good. It does have the wild card icon on it as well, just to say we got some things that need to hit some green lights with this group. But they're in that big cluster that we had also with the Jets from a pass blocking perspective, 9th to 18th. Very solid, reasonable group of linemen to keep Jackson Dart upright. The run blocking, I do have some more questions here. It's probably the biggest question for the Giants' run game there. But let's break things down. So, honestly, yes, you have some younger guys that you're hoping continue to get better here. But the biggest question mark for the Giants' offensive line for me is Andrew Thomas. I mean, he has missed so much time over the last 3 years, injuries in all 3 seasons, and he's only played about 57 to 58% of the team's available snaps. I love Andrew Thomas. He was my OT1 that year. It was a draft win for me to bang the drum for him and talk about how great of a pick that was. And he's a top 5 tackle in the NFL. He's great in both phases. He's locked down in pass protection. He's got all the traits. Just always had underrated athletic ability. And that shows whether he's moving backwards in pass pro or moving forward in the run game. He's got the tenacity. The technique has reached the level of expertise. And I think before the injury this last season, he was playing his best ball. I mean, Andrew Thomas is every coach's dream of a set it and forget it franchise left tackle, and very well might be the best player on this football team. But you can't deny the missed time at this point, and that's going to have to show up as a question mark at this point, unfortunately. So I really hope he can stay healthy and put these injury risks behind him and have, honestly, a Hall of Fame career and stay on the field, because I do think he, as a player, is that good. But you can't miss that many games. You can't undersell and overcomplicate that statement. It's the definition of it is what it is at this point. Please just stay healthy. But you can't pencil it in at this point, sadly. And honestly, that was a big reason, and I'm going to jump out of order a little bit here. We usually just go left to right, but I want to talk about Francis Maui-Noa next. Their top 10 pick, and I love that pick. I was really banging the drum in my mock drafts that was my number 1 target for the Giants. In so many of my mock drafts, I broke this down why it was such a good fit, and it ended up happening, and here he is. And a big reason I loved this is because I think he projects excellent as a guard, but I even preferred him to Vega Ioane on this team, even if Ioane got a higher grade as a guard prospect than Maui-Noa for me, because of everything we just talked about with Andrew Thomas. And Jermaine Illuminor is 31 years old. He's not going to be able to play here forever. And Maui-Noa just checks so many boxes as an NFL offensive lineman. He's close to 330 pounds. He moves really well. That was probably the biggest surprise to me, is I was anticipating maybe more of like a Talise Fuanga, where he's just this strong as an ox guy, but maybe as a tackle, his feet aren't as good. And not with Maui Noah. Like, he's really athletic. He's got great agility. He can slide really well with athletic pass rushers, and in the run game, he can stay square really well. I don't think he had the widest kick slide, like in terms of depth and range against real speed. He maybe had some questions there, but that was more of a stride length question than it is like foot speed and athleticism. And that's just going to be much less of a concern than someone that just can't move their feet. Like, if you're worried of an Evan Neal situation, I don't think that's going to happen here, because Evan Neal just could not move his feet to stay square against NFL pass rushers and D linemen. That's not Maui Noah's problem. In fact, he doesn't really have a problem, so to speak. It was really just like slight dings on, okay, he doesn't get the best depth in his kick slide. And I thought he played a little bit weaker than I expected. I thought he had good play strength, but for a 330-pound guy, I expected him to be like obliterating dudes off the line, to be this like incredible gap run block guy where he's going to drive dudes back 5 yards at the college level. Not really the case. He's more just like going to use the strong hands to stay attached, stay square, more just honestly a very stable brand of blocking in both phases. But anyway, I think his game, especially because the prominent concern was depth in his kick slides, which is not going to be a problem one bit at guard, I think his game perfectly projects inside to guard, and he can be a really good tackle for you in the future as well. And I don't see him as a player, because I think he's very coordinated. I think he's very athletic. I don't think he's going to be a guy that struggles with a transition to guard, especially because he's big enough to slide inside and deal with defensive tackles. So in terms of like looking at this offensive line with a Harbaugh coming in, you know they are all about physicality, build through the trenches. He said it himself like a month before the draft. This pick just made so much sense. He helps you at guard immediately, and maybe he is just a Pro Bowl, all pro level guard, and you just want to keep him there, and I think that's perfectly fine, honestly. Like, look at the Tyler Linderbaum contract. Like, these interior linemen freaking matter. To me, it feels like the way we talk about the game, the way teams are viewing this, is catching up with the reality of, like, honestly, man, interior offensive linemen in many ways you can argue is even more important than tackles. Obviously, tackles are more exposed to having to be on an island, and you need every athletic lever to be able to do that. It's harder to find high-level tackles. But in terms of just impact on the game, every good quarterback in the NFL will tell you, I would rather deal with edge pressure than interior pressure, because you can always step up or find places to go against edge pressure. Interior pressure messes everything up. Tom Brady, I think, really opened a lot of people's minds, like hitting that point home. And from a run game point of view, it's hard to make an argument that tackles are more important than guards or centers. So I think if you just keep him at guard, that's perfectly fine too. But I love the fact that by the last 3 years of evidence's case, in the 43% of scenarios where Andrew Thomas is unavailable for you, I think Francis Mauigoa can kick out to tackle and provide invaluable depth. Whereas when Andrew Thomas has gotten hurt in the last few years, it's been like the wheels fall off of this entire machine. So that's to bring this conversation full circle, that's why I loved Mauigoa for this team especially, is he is automatic plug-and-play tackle depth, and maybe will be your long-term right tackle eventually. So I love the fit. I'm really optimistic for this player. I think he's going to be, maybe not a Hall of Fame upside kind of guy like Andrew Thomas. Maybe he does, but I don't necessarily see him as that level of upside, but certainly someone that, health permitting, should be like a 10-year second contract stud for this team that really helps this offensive line go from what's been a weakness for a long time to what was solid last year to hopefully more of a legitimate strength for these Giants. So there's Maui Noah. Now we'll go more left to right. At left guard, you have John Runyon still. He was there were some questions on if they were going to cut him or not. I think a different coach might have come in and cut him, just depending on what they value. I think Harbaugh really wanted to make sure that this group had a high floor and is going to be able to function to a serviceable level and not rock the boat. But John Runyon is a horrible run blocker. He just doesn't have the play strength, and that shows up as a pass blocker at times as well. But he's technically sound. He picks up stunts. He is, at this point, a very expensive Band-Aid at left guard, but he is there as a weakest link, and that's okay. John Michael Schmitz, this is a big year for him at center as well. At first, felt like he might be a bust. His first year in pass protection was a nightmare, honestly. But you've seen the incremental growth from him, from liability to adequate starter, and that's great. But a contract year for someone that I do still think has the traits to be a quality center in the league. Maybe not an all-pro or anything, but I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to put the up arrow on John Michael Schmitz. But I think because he's dealt with so many moving pieces and injury players around him, he's missed some time for injuries. I do still think there's hope that in a better infrastructure, if guys can stay healthy this time around, and in a contract year for him, I still think there's another level to be unlocked for John Michael Schmitz. I'm encouraged by the fact that he has salvaged a stable career at this point after looking like he might need to be out of the league within a few years of his rookie year. And then you got the right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor. I don't have a ton of notes here. He is a really nice player. He's been critical for this team raising the floor of their offensive line. Not the best athlete. It's going to show up in different pockets of his game. But he is strong as an ox. He's tough as hell. He's maximized his technique. Signs the extension here was, I think, for me, like priority number one was, well, that and the Dexter Lawrence situation. But a huge priority for this team was getting Jermaine Illuminor back. Just a really solid piece for any offensive line. And then you get into the depth, and, it's NFL depth, very standard group. I would say your best depth piece is going to be Lucas Patrick, most likely. He's very much getting up there in age, and he's not someone you want starting. He just doesn't have the traits to consistently hang, but as a center or guard backup, the last time we saw Patrick, he played really well in New Orleans, so okay enough signing if he's in shape. And then you have Daniel Falele, who became a meme in Baltimore, and it was pretty laughable that the Giants ended up signing him just because we give Harbaugh a lot of crap for being a little bit too loyal to his guys. You probably would want to see Harbaugh just try to find something else. I think there is some truth to the fact that Falele is probably better than the amount of crap he gets, generally speaking. He's one of these linemen that, and I remember like Charles Leno was always the case here. Like Bears fans hated Charles Leno, and the underlying metrics on him were much better. Leno was overall just a better player than Daniel Falele, but it's kind of the same idea where Falele was, I think, 58th out of 80 eligible guards in terms of pressure rate allowed. There's some moments in the run game where with his size, it's like, oh, that was actually a pretty damn nice block from him. The problem is he's just so clunky and uncoordinated as an athlete that it prohibits him from having any inconsistency whatsoever, and it leads to just these hilariously ugly losses that in a social media era especially are gonna get thrown around on Twitter. And a lot of people see an embarrassing moment like that and think the guy just cannot play football. I think Falele as a backup guard is still a decent enough NFL backup. You got to understand how bad backup linemen in the NFL are. Falele is better than a lot of them. But you don't want him starting. I'll say that. Any given moment, he can derail a drive because his bad is as bad as anybody's. Interesting player. So ultimately, you have a couple of guard pieces in terms of depth. The tackle depth is, and that's where Maui Noah comes into play. like your tackle depth is Francis Mauigoa, and that's probably the best tackle depth anybody has in the league right now. I don't love these other tackles, especially right now. Like Marcus Mbo, I was really low on him. A lot of people thought he was a steal in the 5th round. I think he should drop 20 pounds and be a flex tight end. I really do. He does not have the play strength to especially anchor and pass pro. He's a phenomenal athlete too. Like I think he could, if he dropped 20, 30 pounds, you might actually be like a good route runner as a tight end. Like that's my Marcus Mbo take. Maybe his hands are just that bad, but if he's bulking up and adding play strength and you're trading some of that athleticism for functional play strength, maybe there's a future for him. I've never really been a big believer in him, and maybe he's more of a center. Like, it's rare to find a guy that can move that well at his size, but you also, like, at the end of the day, it's about strength in the trenches before athleticism. Athleticism's nice, but not when you're weaker than everybody you're in contact with. I did like JC Davis. Ended up being a, 6th round pick? Yeah, 6th round for JC Davis. I love that, honestly. Like, I think he's probably a guard long term. He just isn't the best athlete in terms of range and foot speed. But they got him listed as a tackle for now. That's what he played in college. This dude's strong as an ox. And I thought his tape was pretty solid. So you're probably not going to see too much of him in his rookie season, but more long-term, like probably as a guard developmental piece. Or if you just love Mauigoa at guard, maybe you're talking about Davis as a great swing tackle or even a Jermaine Illuminor-esque long-term replacement. I mean, there's a lot of potential there to be mentored by someone like Jermaine Illuminor, very kind of similar dudes in terms of not the best athlete, but strong as hell. Josh Azudu is still here. That's been ugly. You got some other guard depth. Aaron Stiney and Evan Neal, ironically, is still here. So it's NFL depth. We can move on. Overall, it's a very good starting point with this offensive line. And if John Michael Schmitz and Francis Mauigoa continue to take steps forward, Andrew Thomas can stay healthy. I don't think top 10 is like the fringe of top 10. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for the Giants this season. But if Schmitz stays as is, Mauigoa has some more rookie struggles, and Andrew Thomas gets hurt, this could be more bottom 5 or 6 yet again. So it's got a large range of outcomes for sure, and that's why the wild card shows up for the O-line. But that concludes the offensive breakdown here. Don't need to beat a dead horse, but there's no way you can rank this offense with the approach that I have for this series where we're ranking proven commodities. There's no way you can rank this Giants offense that high. Everything is in the air, whether it's injuries or young players and new staff. Like, it's all a question mark. There's definitely a path for this to be a pretty good offense this year, especially if Jackson Dart just settles in year 2 and things are working with the surrounding cast and the play caller. Yeah, dude, like there's a lot of upside here, but they do come in right now ranked as my 28th ranked offense, 28th in passing game. You do see that run game, though, ranks 19th. There's more reason to believe that the run game should be one of the strengths of this team overall this year compared to the passing game that I think has more question marks. But that's kind of your starting point for the New York Giants, and hopefully not their final destination. All right, just a quick plug before we go over to the defensive side of things. If you like the hat, I got in contact with Trevor Sikkema's hat guy for the NFL Stock Exchange, and this is the early sample of some hats that I'm really excited for. I got 100 of them ordered, so it's going to be first come, first serve when they're able to drop in like a month or so. And I might do a little bit of an early access for patrons first and then to the Discord for the link. So if you want to support the channel on Patreon, you will get the first dibs on the hats. And then Discord as well. There's that link in the description below. Trying to be more active on Discord, interact with you guys there, collect feedback there, and grow that side of things as well. So check out that link in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the chats. But let's talk some Giants defense here, and we'll get right into it, man. They made one of the blockbuster trades of the offseason. You know, you thought Dexter Lawrence getting traded was a big deal? Cleveland Browns said, hold my beer. But yeah, dude, Dexter Lawrence, one of the best defensive players in the league, no longer with this team, and they ended up getting that Francis Mauigoa pick for him. Obviously, the interior defensive line is massively downgraded. You can't. I don't care. I mean, there would have had to be an incredible list of additions to an interior defensive line to say you're not massively downgrading when you lose Dexter Lawrence, and it's not like they did much to replace it either. They add some very old veterans, DJ Reader and Shelby Harris, and a 6th-round pick in Bobby Jamison Travis. And to make matters worse, arguably their best interior defensive lineman, Roy Robertson Harris, tears his Achilles a few weeks ago. Very likely going to miss this entire season. There's some hope that he could come back late. I don't know, man. That seems a little nuts. But just to touch on the trade for a second, like I do think the Giants got good value if they had run this into a situation where it just was no longer a fit, and it really did feel like Dexter kind of wanted out, and the Giants weren't comfortable giving him new money. I'm not going to say the Giants are entirely at fault. There was a lot of noise about like Dexter Lawrence playing a little bit out of shape last year and just not being super dialed in when he wanted new money and didn't get it. So it was time for a change, and to get a top 10 pick for Dexter Lawrence, I think that's pretty par for the course in terms of value. And if you had to trade Dexter Lawrence, yes, those resources were piled into the offensive side of the ball, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it is going to certainly leave the interior of this D line pretty vacant. Now, in terms of the edge, this one was hard because the only addition here is Arvell Reese, who's in year one mostly going to play linebacker for them. Presumably he'll play some off the edge. It's hard to know, right? So you're going to see Arvell Reese show up again with the linebacker offseason changes, but I did say slightly upgraded for edge. If nothing else, just like in terms of how they view edge and how we talked about, like, they're going to take edge rushers and mug them up as blitzing linebackers, whether it's a hybrid piece like Arvell Reese or if it's just Brian Burns. So, like, for how they view edge, Arvell Reese is a part of that group one way or another. So, upgraded in that sense. But let's break this defensive line down. So they came in smack dab in the middle of the league right now for where they rank, which is 16th to 17th for overall D-line. Borderline top 10, though, for pass rush. 8th to 14th, feeling pretty good still about where this pass rush is at, even without Dexter Lawrence. However, that departure of Sexy Dexy is absolutely going to be reflected in the D-line run defense grade, where they rank closer to the bottom of the league, 25th to 26th for D-line run defense. That becomes very much more of a concern. But let's start with the edge room, which is an all-timer in terms of depth and fascination. I mean, you have they're all first-round picks. Brian Burns, obviously, for the Panthers, but 4 highly invested in edge rushers. Burns through the trade and contract. Carter, Thibodeau, and Reese now all top, top 7 picks? What was Thibodeau? No, Thibodeau was like 4th, right? So they're all, I think, top 5 picks in the last 5 years still here. And Chauncey Golston's no slouch either. He's on a 3-year, $20 million deal to be a part of this rotation too. Like, he gets completely forgotten about here, but he's also still here. It's fun, man. Now, I think some Giants fans are waiting on the edge of their seat because I've had some Brian Burns takes throughout my mock drafts and some of my tweets this offseason. I'm pretty low on Brian Burns coming off of a year where he was selected as a second-team All-Pro edge rusher, and I voiced that I could not disagree with that more, that he was one of the 4 best edge rushers in the NFL last year. He's a really good player. Like, I have him as an 84 rated player. That would put him in the top 15 or so of edge rushers in the league, and that's where I view Brian Burns. Like I said, like the Giants top 8 to 14 in pass rush. I think he's a really good player. I just do push back on the amount of praise that he got last year in a very sack-driven season. And I shared the sack reel on Twitter. I'm showing it to you guys now as well. This dude walked into a bunch of sacks that drove up his numbers, and I think we are at a point as a football people that we shouldn't just be picking edge rushers based on sack totals. It's a small sample size of the player's overall breadth of work, and we have so much good charting and access to like NFL Pro to just go in and watch how these guys are getting their sacks and understand that yes, sacks matter.
There's unblocked sacks. There's sacks that are the quarterback's fault. There's sacks that come from being schemed up off of stunts. There's cleanup sacks that are oftentimes created by other rushers winning. Not all sacks are created equal.
And in terms of Brian Burns, I will continue to give him credit too. Like, he will turn a larger percent of his pressures into sacks because he is so athletic. He's got these long arms and can finish as a tackler, and he has the athleticism to stay square. That matters. That's all part of the picture. However, the underlying metrics and how often Brian Burns is actually winning as a pass rusher, it's genuinely alarming. And I do think has to be a part of the conversation here. So Burns finished last season on true pass sets, and that's where you would think he would thrive, right? Get him one-on-one with a tackle, tee off with that spin move, the bend, the speed. He finished 110th out of 129 eligible edge rushers in pass rush win rate. On all snaps, not just true pass sets, he finished 112th out of 129. He finished overall 69th out of 129 players in total pressure rate, and pressure rate on true pass sets, 95th out of 129. He was not winning even at an average level last season in terms of just beating blockers and in terms of pressures, impacting the play, speeding up the quarterback's processing. He converted, honestly, if you really did a deep dive into it, I would imagine he converted a historic rate of his pressures into sacks. And again, he gets some credit for that. But he was not impacting games at an all-pro level last year. He's a good player. He's a really good player. I don't want to lose sight of that. But I certainly think Giants fans are going to look at an 84 rating on Brian Burns and say, you're nuts, that's an all-pro player. He's a game-wrecking edge rusher. That's not where I'm at with him. I think Brian Burns is best off as a number 2, as, yes, a cleanup artist, as an amazing stuntman. A lot of these sacks came on unblocked loops, and his twitch and his athleticism is something that you can leverage, and that's great. But again, those numbers are alarming, to say the least. So that's why I am super excited about Abdul Carter and his future projection here. And that's why I love the Arvell Reese pick as a long-term projection. I do believe, and this is my biggest take in this video, and I've said it before, I'll stand by it. I think Brian Burns is right next to Christian McCaffrey as the biggest regression candidate for the 2026 season. And it's great. He's coming off a big year. Giants fans had a lot of fun with that. And he's still going to be an impact this year, even if he regresses. But I do believe that after this year, and certainly after the 2027 season, you're going to lose sight of that, double-digit sack, second team all-pro season pretty quickly. He's an athlete-based pass rusher. He does not win with power. He depends on his elite athletic ability, which he does have currently. But I do think you look out a year or two, you're going to be talking about a 29, 30-year-old version of Brian Burns, a couple years removed from a second-team All-Pro season, very expensive player. You're going to be ready to turn the corner. And that's really where the Arvell Reese conversation will come in. But especially projecting some of that regression for these next couple years, that's where I really look at Abdul Carter, and it's like, look, I don't really care if Brian Burns regresses in his sack total. If he still does what he did last year and is a good number 2 rusher by the kind of peripheral underlying metrics, is a 50 pressure, let's just say he ends up with 8 sacks, that's kind of like a really good number 2. That's analytically speaking, that's what you can expect from Brian Burns this year. Abdul Carter was a better pass rusher last year than Brian Burns. He was. I watched the tape. I saw it. Abdul Carter was the one beating his man, better pressure rate, better pass rush win rate. We broke all those down for Brian Burns. He was in the hundreds for most of those metrics. The best was 69th for pressure rate. Abdul Carter was top 40 in all of them and was 22nd out of 129 players in true pass sets, pass rush win rate. It translated for Abdul Carter. And because the expectations were runaway defensive player of the year as a top, number 2 draft pick or whatever it was, number 3 draft pick, nobody talked about it because he wasn't, rookie year Nick Bosa. And the Giants were so bad, I guess, as well. That certainly didn't help. But I'm on the record, and you can't just say I'm a Giants hater. Like, I'm just calling it like I see it. I'm on the record. I did my postseason awards show. Abdul Carter was my pick for defensive rookie of the year. He was the best defensive rookie. Look, Carson Schwessinger was awesome. Abdul Carter, on any normal situation, on a team that anybody was watching, we would have been talking about how much he was impacting the defense and opening things up for everybody else. Brian Burns doesn't have the year he has without Abdul Carter wrecking games in the way that he did. And that was just a starting point. That's a guy who's now played 2 years as an edge rusher. 1 year at Penn State, 1 year with the Giants. Look, the Micah Parsons comps on Abdul Carter were in some ways lazy because he had the same trajectory as Micah Parsons coming out of Penn State as a former linebacker. Sometimes it just works out that way. And he really does have that rare, there's that elite athleticism, and then there's what Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter have. He teleports around blocks. His get off, his bend, his ability to beat you to the corner, just as a baseline for his ability to win as a rusher, it was so similar to Micah Parsons in his rookie season, where it's just different. And then you're going to see him figure things out even more. Add to that pass rush package, understanding how to set up what he does with his unique style so much more. And you could even argue Abdul Carter has more of a pass rushing skill set than a young Micah Parsons did, especially with that spin move that he has that is just nasty, man. I really do think Abdul Carter was one of the most under-discussed budding megastars in the league last year. And if he can take that big leap, you're going to be really in business with this Giants defense. Now, there were still some games where Abdul Carter would disappear. Some teams seemed to have a better plan for him or had linemen that matched up with his athleticism a little bit more. Again, you still need to see some development, but I'm extremely high on Abdul Carter. And if he can take another step and be more of a true number 1, that's amazing. And you're not going to care if Brian Burns doesn't have the same sack luck he had last year, because he's then an awesome number 2 to play off of that. So that's really the core of how you end up with the pass rush ranking as high as you do. Neither of these guys are great run defenders. I think they're both okay. I think Brian Burns has gotten better at it over the years. I think Abdul Carter will get better at it over the years. But it is certainly a great starting point with the pass rush. And then you have Kayvon Thibodeau, who's kind of a fascinating conversation. He's not lived up to his draft expectations, and I loved Thibodeau. I thought he would be much better by now than he is. He's still gotten incrementally better, and I would say he has settled in as naturally a really good number 3 piece for any given D-line, and especially this unit. He is actually turned into a really good run defender. That was what stood out to me the most from him last year. I think that is extremely valuable when Abdul Carter and Brian Burns are just okay as run defenders. But someone that'll, have a little bit more of that heavy-handed ability to set a hard edge is needed here, and he brings that. And then as a rusher, he's still incredibly athletic. He has glimpses of power. He has some swipes with his hands. He's an okay pass rusher as a number 3. Will something click in a contract year for him? Maybe. Some people might argue the up arrow should still be pointing up, obviously, on Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know. At this point, he didn't have much of a rush package in college. He's still never really developed it. I feel pretty good saying Thibodeau is just a good NFL edge player. And he very well might be a trade candidate for this team. If things are going south and they don't think they're going to pay him, you might be able to flip him for a 4th round pick around the trade deadline. he's one of these players that just comes with certain standards that, he's probably going to get a little bit more than he's earned on the field, frankly, just because of the draft pedigree. And he's not afraid to, have that big personality and want his money, which is fine. But it's just kind of who he is as a personality. So they might say, we've got enough here. We're willing to move on. Enter Arvell Reese, right? Another pick that I loved. And another pick that it's kind of like Maui Noah, where he's filling in at a position that maybe you say is less valuable, and certainly linebacker compared to edge. Like, you look at the team right now and you're like, he'll be able to help us here. Maybe he'll be an edge long-term, or Maui Noah's case, he might be a tackle long-term, but it's like, look, this is just a damn good football player. We're going to find a way to get him out there right now. And that's going to be as a linebacker. And we're going to have like, as if there was two Arvell Reeses on this team, we're going to have the conversation twice, because it's not a true hybrid situation. I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, he literally played linebacker at Ohio State, but everybody projected him as an edge. So you can literally talk about him plugging in two different position groups. This isn't like a hybrid role. This is a hybrid player that can play two true starting roles for you, if that makes sense. But let's keep this to kind of the pass rushing and edge conversation for Reese, and then we're going to bring him back up when we get to the linebacker room. It's just kind of the only way to do it. But I am on the record here saying that if Arvell Reese, by the 2028 season, is not an edge player for the Giants, I will go on camera and eat a jar of mayo. Was that smart of me to say that? Is that entirely stupid and not worth the reward? Yeah, I'm an idiot, but I do believe it. Like, the plan here is not to take Arvell Reese and make him a linebacker. There's not enough value in doing that, and Arvell Reese himself spent his preseason process bulking up. He's not an idiot. He sees the contracts. Devin Lloyd was a first-team All-Pro. He got $15 million on the open market. Will Anderson just got $50 million. And that's the superstars. I mean, even if Arvell Reese is just Odafe Owe or, Phillips, like, that's still double what he's going to make as a linebacker. It's not just about what the Giants want here with all these conversations, and it's not about what you want as someone that liked Arvell Reese as a fun linebacker, because linebackers and fullbacks are positions that, like, NFL fans love, but in reality don't do as much on the field as you like to think they do. But it's also about what Arvell Reese wants to do, right? And I think he wants to be an edge player as well, and he doesn't want to get sucked into this, like, oh, you're actually a linebacker, so we don't have to pay you that much money. No, like, he's going to be an edge eventually, in my opinion. To begin with, he'll play a lot of linebacker. You might just be their starting LB2. But I do want to talk about him at least a little bit as that long-term projection. And like I said, he's going to rush a lot, whether he's a linebacker or an edge. And I think they might work him in. Like, it might be a case where he might play a drive a game as an edge, just like in a part of that rotation, just as like your fourth or fifth edge rusher might normally play, just to kind of start to get the ball rolling with that. It's going to be really fun to see how they use him ultimately. But like I said, when they get to third down, it doesn't really matter what position Arvell Reese is. He's going to be a part of this Mike McDonald blitz package. And we broke that whole scheme down, but they're all about just getting your five best rushers on the field, being incredibly multiple, and they're not afraid in these systems to take any given edge rusher and just have you stand up and rush over a center or a guard. And that's absolutely what Arvell Reese projects being able to do. That's what he did at Ohio State most of the time. And they have the added benefit of, because of this scheme and the multiplicity of it and the rotational nature of their fronts, he's kind of naturally going to get those edge reps, because you're going to take Brian Burns or Abdul Carter and slide them inside, and it'll be Reese lining up on the edge. So it's a really great infrastructure for a player that has himself incredible upside. There were Micah Parsons comps on Arvell Reese as well. Slightly different. Like, Reese is an incredible athlete, but Reese is a little bit different in the sense that, like, he's just, and the reason myself and many people say, no, this should be an edge rusher, is he has the power thing down. Like, he's got hammers for hands, the speed to power ability. That's not necessarily how I would describe Abdul Carter. Like, Reese is going to develop in his own kind of unique path compared to an Abdul Carter. Just they win in different ways, I think. But anyway, really a comfortable environment here where he's a raw player that played a lot of linebacker and a little bit of edge at Ohio State. They're going to be able to ease him into what their long-term projection is for him, doing what he's currently comfortable with, what he did at Ohio State as a linebacker. But when you project things out and say, okay, Brian Burns by the end of 2027, probably not going to be a huge part of this team's future. Abdul Carter is an elite Batman type, ideally, in a year or two, if not this year. Kayvon Thibodeau might not be here. You have such a great infrastructure where you can, through the scheme and the players around him, ease him into an edge role, still get a lot of value at him as a rusher and as a linebacker, and then eventually craft. Ultimately, what matters here is it is not unreasonable to entertain the idea that the Giants could have the best edge rush duo in the NFL in 2028, 2029. Arvell Reese's upside is phenomenal. His developmental trajectory was always going to be fascinating, and you wanted to see him go to the right opportunity to have that proper development, and this does just make a ton of sense. So very much love that draft pick. He's going to make an impact on this pass rush, even if it's more of a blitzing, blowing shit up, used through the scheme type of way to begin with. And then Chauncey Golston's here too. Like I said, he's getting paid like $6 million a year to be a good rotational kind of 3-down D lineman type. Missed about half the season last year, so we kind of just forget about him, but that's great depth as well. So it's an incredible edge room. Khalid Kareem is here too. He's had some good games against the run throughout his career, but love this edge room, even though I'm lower on Brian Burns. Now, hate this interior defensive line. This is laughable. We entertained the idea in the interview with Bengal that this is the worst interior D-line in the league. I mean, it's bad even if everything goes right here, but you're also counting on a 35-year-old Shelby Harris, a regressing, injury-prone, older DJ Reader, and you're counting on a 26-year-old rookie in Darius Alexander that you thought the biggest idea with him was, yeah, he's older, but he's complete, and he's going to hit the ground running, and he wasn't much of an impact in his rookie year as he tried to make the jump up from Toledo. Massive question marks and not even that much upside. That ain't great, Bob. I don't want to spend that much time on Harris and Reader. I mean, we know what they are. Reader is a true nose tackle. In his prime, he was probably the best 3-down nose tackle in the league until Dexter Lawrence, ironically, took that crown. But he's dealt with some very serious injuries the last few years. He was okay in Detroit. He's also a guy that can't really play every snap, just from a stamina point of view, but also just like durability would be a huge concern there. So you're going to have to limit his snap counts, or you're going to end up with him not being able to play, in my opinion, most likely, unless you get really lucky. It's still a good signing. I still think he can eat up space, and for a very undersized interior D-line, like, you need him. So it's good that he's here, but temper expectations. Shelby Harris has extended his career. He's a nice player. He's undersized. He does a little bit of everything. He's 35 years old and has been a part of a rotation now, as opposed to where he once was as a starter. But he's a good piece to rotate, sure. And then you got Darius Alexander, who I liked coming out. Thought he had athleticism, power, pass rush moves, like dominant tape at Toledo, amazing Senior Bowl, but total non-factor in his rookie season. The occasional flash, but rotated in 16 games. He had 15 pressures, a few sacks, was a problem against the run. Look, I want to believe. I still put the up arrow on him just to say something positive here, but he is already 26 years old, turns 26 right before the season starts at least. And, maybe just making that jump from Toledo to the NFL is just a little bit too much for him. It's hard to be overly optimistic for him. Again, I loved him as a prospect, but there's just not really a whole lot from what he did in his rookie season. And if he was younger, I would give him a little bit more benefit there, but it's just tough. Beyond that, Sam Roberts actually played pretty well last year. Really popped. I remember talking about him in a Studs and Duds episode for Atlanta, but then he got hurt. It was 4 games where he got into the rotation and showed some good stuff. So we'll keep an eye on it. Like maybe they found a diamond in the rough free agent signing. If it's going to be anybody on this interior D-line that comes out of nowhere and surprises, it would be him. Lucky Fotu, I'm not really counting on. 6th-round pick Jamison Travis, I didn't get to. You got 4 other names in the mix there. And then, again, losing Roy Robertson Harris is not ideal. He was going to be able to be kind of a matchup interior player for them in their kind of hybrid fronts, and he tears his Achilles. So that certainly doesn't help. Not that he's a great player or anything, but he was going to be in the mix. So, yeah, man, you're looking at 2027 and beyond to keep replenishing this interior D line. If Darius Alexander doesn't step up, you're going to need probably a whole new interior D line in a year, and it's just not where you want to be. So it does drag them down and definitely shows up in terms of the run defense. Like, I think you're going to be able to get through these guys. Hate to kind of leave the D-line on a negative note because I still like the group overall and how things are going to play out in time. But yeah, let's go to linebacker, starting with their offseason changes, where you will see Arvell Reese show up again as an addition. But also, Tremaine Edmonds gets a nice-sized free agent contract here. Micah McFadden comes back from a season-ending foot injury that he suffered, I think, on the second drive of the game. Just brutal in a big third season for him. And they spent a 6th-round pick on Jack Kelly. So it's a very new-look linebacker room. And then they do also say goodbye to Bobby Okereke, who really fell off last year. Still out there in free agency. I feel like he's a bounce-back candidate, but maybe he's just completely lost it. But yes, upgraded at linebacker. And with those upgrades, they come in for me as the 24th overall linebacker room. 23rd to 24th for the run defense side of things, and 19th to 24th for coverage. So as a starting point, kind of middle of the road or slightly below average for a linebacker. I don't feel a need to spend much time on Tremaine Edmonds at this point. Obviously was a hot commodity coming out for Buffalo. Really like traitsy, good athlete, size, you name it. And that helps like raise the floor of his game, but he's definitely like nothing. It hasn't always clicked for him. I don't think he's all that instinctive or processes things all that well. It just ended up kind of a very solid linebacker, and I'm no longer really projecting growth for him. And Chicago just couldn't justify quite paying him $16 million a year, right? And the Giants ended up paying him $12. Like, Chicago could have kept him, but they needed to save a little bit of money and saw him as a good player, but largely replaceable. And that's kind of what you're dropping in as the center point of this linebacker room for now. But you could do worse, certainly. And I agree with paying him if you're the Giants. Like, they needed something to raise the floor of this group, because the rest of this, like, you have other pieces, but neither Arvell Reese or Micah McFadden, with where they're at, you could really count on them as just the green dot, getting people aligned. You've got a whole, new staff coming in. You need a leader of the defense type dropped into the middle of this. Tremaine Edmonds should be able to provide that. Arvell Reese is a much more fun, fascinating conversation. We obviously talked about him as an edge, and here he is as that kind of LB2/edge role here. I'm not going to go back down that path, but the primary purpose for him as a linebacker is going to blitz. I would not be surprised if when you sort all linebackers by the end of the year, if Arvell Reese has the most blitzing snaps out of all of them. And that was similar at Ohio State. Even though he was more often than not a linebacker at Ohio State, he did still play about a third of his snaps as a D lineman, as an edge rusher. And when they got to third down, he was either in a QB spy role or blitzing. So yes, he's done some of the earlier down, like run diagnostics stuff, and he's awesome at taking on blocks. Like that's the best thing you could say about him, probably in both categories as an edge rusher or a linebacker, is like, he is strong as hell for as athletic as he is, and he can absolutely take on guys in between the tackles and do your classic like linebacker stack, peek, shed stuff. However, the run diagnostics are still behind the eight ball just because he hasn't done a ton of it. It's hard for any young linebacker, but especially someone that's asked to do as much as he was. I would say he impressed with how good he was at getting to the ball as a linebacker, as a run defending linebacker, considering all of that, but still going to be a lot on his plate for earlier down run defense duties. And then from a coverage standpoint, it's really hard to give him too much credit. There were some moments where he saw stuff breaking down in front of him. There were some moments with his speed that you could see, like he's got his usefulness as a coverage player, but in terms of like actually breaking down zone concepts, getting into deeper zone drops, asking a lot of him as a coverage defender, that's just, there's not a whole lot of evidence of that. So from a pass defense standpoint, it's what he's bringing to the table as a rusher, even in this role this year. And then I do think Micah McFadden gets into the mix as well, especially because I do think Arvell Reese will rotate into different roles, whether it's as a weak side backer in more like 4-3 base types of situations, but especially just playing Arvell Reese up on the edge. You might see Micah McFadden come in, and I thought Micah McFadden was poised for a nice year last year. It was really a bummer that he got hurt. He's also a great blitzer, by the way. That's what he's best at. But he's a see-ball, hit-ball, north and south, like high-energy linebacker. I had to throw him up there as a quasi-starter. I think he'll be in the mix, and there might even be some times where they want to give Arvell Reese a little bit of a breather and just give the drive to McFadden, and then Reese comes in for their rush packages. Like, it's going to be, I think, a decent amount of rotating around between these two linebackers. Reese will probably play more, but I wouldn't be surprised if McFadden can get back healthy if he isn't too far behind Reese, because he's just more experienced and complete as a real linebacker right now. But yes, as far as Reese is concerned in his role, he will primarily play linebacker. He's going to be a pretty good run defending linebacker on earlier downs, and then his role will shift on third downs, in my opinion, is kind of the plan for him. I do more look at this as more of a vacation in this linebacker room, play his role as a run defender, than he's here to stay and develop and become this incredible off-ball linebacker type. That is so far removed from how I think you should use Arvell Reese. And people think I'm like being anti-Arvell Reese or anti-New York Giants when I say that. I think it's smart to look at things like I'm talking about Arvell Reese and how I think the Giants plan to use him. Now, if he surprises and he's all over the field in coverage and he's not blitzing that much, or he's just like really breaking things down and he actually shows that he actually is going to be this like incredible off-ball linebacker, maybe the conversation changes, but then you're still talking about all of the linebacker positional value questions for a number 5 pick in the draft. And is that what Arvell Reese wants long-term as well? So it does get a little murky for sure. Hopefully we navigated the Arvell Reese situation well enough and are good to move on. The rest of your linebacker depth, I'm glad that they have more options here because I'm just not a Darius Muasau fan. He's had to play a good bit here, and he's had some moments getting to the ball in the run game, but a lot of missed tackles, a lot of just wrong place, wrong time in coverage. They do draft Jack Kelly, who I think is probably a long-term Micah McFadden replacement. In fact, he reminded me a lot of Micah McFadden, just a kind of straight line blitz threat that maybe can get a little bit better at the linebacker things, if you will. Zaire Barnes has played a little bit as well. A little bit smaller, a little more athletic, but there is your Giants linebacker room. Again, they're a solid group. You have a little bit of everything. Edmonds helps you kind of raise the floor. We'll see just how great Arvell Reese is going to be as a linebacker. McFadden's a pretty solid player. I think this is one of those rooms we talk about where they'll allow this defense to do what they want to do, especially from a blitzing perspective with Reese and McFadden. Shouldn't really get in their way and hurt this defense, but probably not going to uplift this defense either, like a select few groups of linebackers in the league can. But let's go to the secondary. So they, at cornerback, lose Cordale Flott. I don't know that they were expecting to, but man, Tennessee they had a couple guys on this Giants team that Dable must have put in a big, big word for, because Cordale Flott got a lot of money, more than he probably had earned with the Giants. He had a good year last year, though, and he is a loss. They draft Colton Hood in the second round, who will break down, and they do bring in Greg Newsome, who had a rough year last year. So I did say to be determined, number one, because I think Cordale Flott may or may not be as good as he was last year, but also Colton Hood is a young player. Hard to know exactly what he's going to give you this year, but there's a world where this is better. There's a world where it is a little worse. At safety, I said slightly upgraded. They say goodbye to Dane Belton, who had an okay year last year, but they do get Ardarius Washington after he suffered a big injury last year. But this is an interesting Giants secondary here. There's actually a good bit of upside here for this to be a really good unit and a foundational piece of this entire team. But they got to hit a lot of green lights here. Some questionable players and some young players, certainly. But they do have a good baseline as well. They actually come in that giant cluster of just like solid, okay secondaries that is, there's going to be 10 teams in this series that fall into this large tier that ranks 16th to 26th for secondary coverage grade. They're just okay projecting as a run defense impact from the secondary as well. So for overall secondary, the Giants come in ranking 20th to 25th. But let's break it down. So I mentioned you have some question mark veterans and you have some youth. One of the question mark veterans is going to be Paulson Adebo, who has just been very inconsistent throughout his career. Going back to New Orleans, it felt like he had a couple good years, a couple bad years. One of those good years was right before he hit free agency, and the Giants bought into that. And then it felt like he went back to just being okay. There was a lot going on last year. The defensive coaching was some of the worst in the league last year, and I'm willing to cut Adebo some slack for that. But he has been a guy that has just been up and down throughout his career. So he gets the yellow arrow for me at a 77 rating. I still like Paulson Adebo. I like the signing when they made it. But I don't think he played up to a 77 rating last season. If he repeats, he's a worse player than I'm projecting him right now. He's had years where he's been bordering on a CB1 and someone that hits free agency and makes almost $20 million a year, right? So that's kind of where he's at. And we're just going to have to wait and see how he fits with this new look team, organization, and scheme. I do think he's been a little bit more of a man-oriented player throughout his years than zone, but he's old enough at this point that hopefully the zone stuff is at a good point where he can thrive in more of a zone-oriented defense. And then you have Colton Hood and Greg Newsome, kind of in a position battle here. I'm putting Colton Hood up there just because, look, Greg Newsome might be the week 1 starter. I would bet on Colton Hood starting by like week 8. Greg Newsome has just, at this point, shown that he can't play consistently enough, and he's just not physical. Now, Colton Hood's got a little bit to prove, too, in terms of getting involved as a run defender. That was actually one of my biggest concerns on Colton Hood. He was so disinterested against the run as a perimeter corner. There was times where you're like 5 or 6 seconds into the play and he's still got his back turned and running with a wide receiver who's like literally just stopped. And it's like, dude, it's clearly a run. Like, show some interest. So, I would imagine different coaching, NFL level, got to fight for his job here. Like he tackles when he's in the area and he's strong. I would imagine he doesn't just have the up arrow on him from a coverage perspective. I think he can be a better run defender at the NFL level than he was in college, but it was a concern. But Hood was a high draft pick for this team, top 40 pick, and a really talented man-to-man corner. He's got good size, good speed, great like press jams, stay in a guy's hip pocket. He's physical, but not overly physical. Just really good man coverage tape. Not much zone stuff to write home about. Wasn't asked to be more of an eyes on the quarterback, off zone guy too often. And when he was, it was cover 4 at Tennessee, which is, they're different. And obviously they will run cover 4, and I think he can handle that, but they're still going to be running cover 3 close to a third of the time. That's probably where Colton Hood is going to have to show that he can provide that proper spacing and understand route combinations like cover 3, cover 2. Your zone IQ is really going to come into play, and they will run that much more here with the Giants than he was asked to do that with the Titans. So for me, it's more of a matter of like when that comes up to speed. More often than not, the zone stuff will come along in time. That's kind of the old coaching adage is like, give me the guy that can play man, I'll teach him how to play zone. Not every corner learns how to play zone, and if Colton Hood doesn't, he's not going to be a very good corner. But hopefully, young player, good head on his shoulders, is gonna come into form there. So I like the pick. Just might not be amazing out the gate for a zone heavy defense like this. But when you do want to play bump and run, like you got another guy that can absolutely do that in Colton Hood. And then you have Drew Phillips, who's more of a slot, and he's kind of the main reason I don't think the Giants are going to do a whole lot of that like Mike McDonald, big nickel, 3 safety stuff. There's a chance they do. Like, it's all in play. We still have to see this all play out. Like, if they really don't like Colton Hood or Greg Newsome, I do think Drew Phillips kind of like Devon Witherspoon in Seattle. You know, not as good of a player, but same idea as like an undersized guy that's better in the slot, but he can go outside and play in those earlier down packages. So maybe we're talking about, you know, more of a Ardarius Washington starter situation where either Holland or Newbin are coming down into the nickel and Drew Phillips is outside. You have options. We just got to see how that all plays out. And options are a good thing. It's a part of the floor being baked in here, but we do need to see how that all plays out. But yeah, as a slot corner, Drew Phillips is really frisky, really good in the short to intermediate game, defending short routes, flats, curl flats, hook zones. It was good to get Bengals opinions on Drew Phillips. Like, he's much more worried about Phillips, like down the field, getting his head around, the speed, maybe not great. So there's some limitations there, I think. And then you go down the depth a little bit at cornerback, Deonte Banks, talk about not getting your head around. He's been a bust, unfortunately. It was a huge draft miss for me. I'm sorry, Giants fans. I got you too hyped on Deonte Banks. Just a tough one, man. It's been a learning experience. Like, he is the reason I now put more value on cornerbacks proving that they can get their head around when they're targeted down the field, because Banks was amazing at everything else. And honestly, he's been pretty sticky in coverage for the Giants, but he just cannot find the ball. And you end up grabbing, number one, and getting penalties. But these NFL wide receivers are too good at winning contested catches, at tracking the ball, at fighting through contact. If you aren't disrupting the catch point, even if you're in a good position, you're going to be getting given up catches. And that's been Banks' problem. I don't want to just entirely write off Greg Newsome either. He has had good moments. He was a first-round pick for the Browns, and as long as he's still in the same shape he was 4 or 5 years ago when he came out, he can really move. He has those oily hips you look for, and he had those quick reactions from off quarters coming out of Northwestern. The one reason you maybe wouldn't give up on him is I feel like he still has not been properly placed in the right scheme throughout his career. Cleveland was a very man-heavy team and oftentimes put him in the slot and asked a lot of him from physical demands, which he can't handle. Jacksonville brought him in and he was horrible in Jacksonville, but Jacksonville was in the bottom third of the league in the kind of quarters cover 6 combinations of coverage. So maybe he's finally in the right system, and system really matters for corners. It's a decent enough signing. It's just, scheme fit aside, he's just been so inconsistent to bad at times. It's really hard to count on that. Corey Black is here as well. He's played a little bit along with like Nick Jones and Rico Payton, but getting pretty far down the depth there in terms of guys that are actually going to make the team. Overall, I think you can start to see how you end up with a pretty, solid, average ranking secondary, with corner being so important. It's not a bad cornerback room. Maybe not amazing. We'll see what Colton Hood's upside ultimately is, but certainly players that can hold their own but will give up plays in coverage as well. And then you go to the safety room and you've got more questions. You have Javon Holland, who has had 2 really down years. And it's concerning at this point. He did not get as much money in free agency as I expected. And, it's not like that defines how good a player is. But for someone that I viewed as a top 5 to 8 safety in the league, it was already weird to me that Miami would be willing to let that player go anyway. And then for him to not even be the highest paid safety in that market, the alarm bells start to go up. And I did some digging, and it sounds like, he's maybe a little bit more of like a loose cannon inside the locker room is what I heard. It's not like he gets in trouble or gets ejected for being dirty or anything, but it certainly has shown up in the sense that he hasn't really been around the ball. He's started to miss a lot of tackles. He's been a double-digit missed tackle rate guy the last 2 years. And he's just kind of faded away in terms of the impact he's making on a secondary. You want to see more of those splash plays from a highly paid safety like this, and you just don't get a lot of them. I mean, he only had 9 defensive stops last year. That's brutal. He only has 1 interception the last 2 years. Interceptions can be fluky, but 2 full seasons, you'd want to see at least a couple. So he gets an 80 rating for me, which is almost entirely attached to what he was in the first 3 years of his career at Miami, where I did think he was bordering on being a top 5 safety in the NFL. He has been, you wouldn't even put him in the top. If you did the ball-knowing alien experiment and he, entered Earth the year 2024 and you said, watch all the safeties, who are the best 30 safeties in the NFL starting in the 2024 season with no prior knowledge of Javon Holland, you wouldn't even come close to getting Javon Holland. So he also gets the yellow arrow. If this is just who he is now, and he's just another guy, someone that will lose in coverage, that isn't around the ball, that misses some tackles, that's closer to being a problem for your defense than a strength. But maybe he bounces back, and this system's a good fit for him, and they can leverage what used to be a really instinctive, rangy player into more playmaking opportunities. So it's a big year for Javon Holland, to say the least. Big year for Tyler Nubin, too. I actually did put the green up arrow on him. He's not in a lot of Giants fans' graces this year. He had a good rookie season that was primarily focused around his presence around the box and his physicality, not so much his coverage capabilities. And this year, he started missing a bunch of tackles. So you lose some of that run defense. The missed tackle rate almost doubled this year from 9% in his rookie year to 17% this year. Questions start to stack up. So I do still believe in him. I think he sees the game well. I think he's very physical and can be put in a better position to succeed. And hopefully this system can do that in more of a split safety type of mindset. But it's certainly not a given. I put the green up arrow on him because I'm going to choose to believe in Tyler Nubin here in year 3. You could actually probably argue for the yellow arrow as well, because we got a 72 rating on him right now. I wouldn't say he played up to that last year. He was certainly a liability last year, so it's a big year for him. He adds to some question marks here. And then you do have our Darius Washington, fun player, and he is just one of those players that is so painfully undersized that he's going to have his limitations. I mean, he had a 1 breakout year in 2024 that was awesome, and then he's got a rough go at it. Not only did God not bless him with the physical tools to be a great NFL player, he's up against the odds in that sense at 5'8", 180 pounds, and he's not fast either. But he dealt with a brutal injury that knocked him out for pretty much all of last year, right in a big spot where he was going to get a chance to kind of prove that he can follow it up with a big year. But even in that big year, like getting outmatched as a tackler, can't really size up in the box. Like he doesn't have the highest upside, but he did show in 2024, especially when they really put him on the back end in three safety packages. Really, that was when they really put Kyle Hamilton back into the nickel, three safety based defense, and Ardarius Washington was just the back end guy. Using his instincts, he's another example that, like, even if you're not that fast, as long as you are seeing things well and anticipating, you can get yourself in a good position to make plays. And he had 10 passes defended in that 2024 season. So where is he at health wise? Like, only played 61 snaps last year, really couldn't go. Tried to fight back. And if and how they want to use him. Like, I don't think Ardarius Washington can really be practical as a starting safety in a traditional nickel defense. Like, he could be okay maybe, but especially in a three safety defense where you're just keeping them in space, limiting those size deficiencies in a world where either Javon Holland or Tyler Nubin are more of your nickel. Again, they have options to do that, and I like that as a signing. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if that's the direction they want to go. Just kind of depends on how well these corners play. You got Jason Pinnock, I believe was originally drafted by this team and then has gone all around to like the Jets and the Niners, but he's established himself as like special teams depth and safety depth, along with Elijah Campbell, Raheem Lane, Bo Braid. Those guys are all in your sort of like really just here to cover kicks, and you'll hold your breath if they got to see the field for your defense. But that does conclude your secondary there. It's a very interesting unit with a really wide spectrum of potential outcomes, in my opinion. But let's tie this whole defense together. Another side of the ball here where it's a lot of work to do. They come in 25th, so a little bit better on the defensive side of the ball. I do think a lot of potential, especially with, the pass rush taking another leap, the secondary, and the coaching. Like, if Denard Wilson, if this can be a better fit for him and he can prove that he can really get this Mike McDonald system going, then yeah, you could be more of a, closer to average, 16th type of defense. You certainly have the pieces to work with. It's just, as we detailed, you've got questions. They are actually 21st for pass defense, so that's reflected pretty well there. It is that run defense, though, 28th for run defense. That interior D-line is a major question. Everything else is okay, but it's just not enough to really uplift anything here. So there is your defensive breakdown. Let's talk a little bit of special teams before we get into the interview with Bengal and some final predictions for this team. But definitely some change with special teams. They're swapping punters, bringing Jordan Stout over. And then Gunnar Olszewski actually just went down with an injury. He was primed to be their primary return man. They've since added Braxton Berrios, and they do have Calvin Austin was a wide receiver addition that can do some stuff there too. So I said neutral at special teams. Let's show how they graded out. The Giants came in 23rd for overall special teams. And these special teams rankings for me are much more of a programmable formula, just plugging in more objective metrics. So I take a look at the PFF and DVOA team grades, which average together is a nice tool to show how these teams were on special teams in the previous season as a projection for the future. So they came in kind of middle of the pack there, 17th per PFF and 23rd per DVOA. The kicker has seen some recent shakeup. I think whatever the kicker's name is that's now on the Jets that we just talked about was here. Then they let him go. Now it's Ben Sauls, who made, I think he was like 7 for 7 on the Giants last year. Not enough to like really take too much from, but a good start. And baked in his college kicker grades too, so kind of had to workshop his rating there, but came in 24th for kicker, like decent enough projection for Ben Sauls. We'll see what he can do. The punter, actually, Jordan Stout has not graded out well. They gave him a contract. Harbaugh likes him, but, just has not graded out well, so 30th at punter there. Returner, they have options. They came in middle of the pack for returner, especially the punt return situation. Like Calvin Austin and Braxton Berrios are still pretty good options there. The kick return, like Deonte Banks actually had some good returns last year. But yeah, just solid special teams. Hopefully Harbaugh can straighten this thing even in a better direction. But let's recap some things here before we get to the interview with Bengal. So just to look at their strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, the Giants are polarizing in the sense that they don't have a lot of true strengths. I really just wrote pass rush, and even then it was, what do we have, 8th to 14th, so it's not like an elite strength, but it's still a good pass rush relative to the rest of the league. Weakness is its quarterback right now with a young Jackson Dart, and then offensive and defensive coaching as well. Like they didn't rank out that high there, right? Both were towards the bottom 8 or so of the league for now. But the for now is important there, right? Like you can easily see a path where the coaching ends up pretty good here and the quarterback ends up pretty good here. And then you end up with really no true weaknesses. And then you have this massive middle ground of pivotal factors, things that could turn into, more strengths for this team. And Jackson Dart shows up there, probably more talking about getting quarterback out of the weaknesses category with Dart. But Malik Neighbors' health is a big deal. If he gets back full go, and then he could bake in some of the other youth and spots with the weapons, but it all centers around Malik Neighbors. If he's back full go and he's green lighted, weaponry could be closer to a strength for the Giants. Offensive line, you've got Andrew Thomas's health and a couple of young guys in their development. Offensive line could be a strength. The D-line with Abdul Carter and just how big of an impact does Arvell Reese make? Can Darius Alexander give you anything? D-line could be, obviously pass rush already shows up as a strength, but could that be more of a game-wrecking pass rush as opposed to just a strength, a good pass rush? And then the secondary is a huge wild card as well. So I do look at the Giants, especially compared to some of these other teams, where it's you want to talk about teams where the ranking could age like milk and they end up a playoff team. And I got to issue public apologies for ranking them 27th heading into the year. This is one of those teams that has that sort of potential. That happened to me with the Patriots last year, right? Giants fans are obviously waiting on the edge of their seat, hoping that happens. But that's kind of why this screen is here, to show look, there's a lot that could go right for this team. They just got to go out and do it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in Bengal for the interview. I want you guys to enjoy this interview. And then I'm going to come back and break down their schedule, talk about my floor, ceiling, and final win total prediction for this team, along with giving the superlative awards for the Giants. And now I'm super excited to welcome back for the Giants Deep Dive our friend Bengal. It was 2 years ago that we had you on. It was post Daniel Jones extension, and hopefully this time around there's a little bit more hope for your Giants here. I'm excited to get your thoughts as a new regime's coming in here. But how you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Yeah, who could have seen that Daniel Jones extension not working out? Unbelievable. But yeah, it's good to be back. I didn't make the cut last year, but I'm happy to be invited back.
Yeah, it was a hectic year last year. I know you're going through a move right now, so that's what I had to cut a lot of guest interviews, trying to really ramp it up this year. So happy to have you. First question here is all about the head coach hire. John Harbaugh gets the gig. I'm not going to go through my whole opinion on it. Surely going to have done that earlier in the video here, but I'm a little lower on Harbaugh. I'm curious what your impression of the hire was and how excited you are there.
Yeah, I'm probably right where you are, because one of my best buddies through YouTube is Wheels, who's a big Ravens fan. You guys know him from the Madden community. He's complained to me about John Harbaugh for years, and I've seen the things as well. I mean, even the Giants got the better of John Harbaugh's Ravens with poor clock management and poor decision making. And
that's saying something.
It's yeah, exactly. It's always an interesting thing when you have a head coach where it's like, this guy is so valuable. And it's like, well, what does he do? Does he call plays at an elite level? No, he actually doesn't call plays at all. It's like he picks good people around him. It's like, what happens when that doesn't work out? I think we kind of saw that a little bit more recently, and the Ravens chose to make a change. I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, because what I think he does do is raise the floor. I think that's already a big bonus. I'm used to the Giants winning between like 3 and 6 games a year. Now I think they're going to be, a potential 7 to 9 win team. And
Okay.
I think if they do that, even if they're not a playoff team, which that's what the expectation is if you listen to any New York sports stuff, I think everyone expects the Giants to be a playoff team, and if not, it's a failure. But if the Giants win 8 games this year, that's already double what I'm used to, pretty much. So I'm happy about that overall. I've seen the Super Bowls. I obviously like to see more, but just seeing the team be slightly more competitive on a week-to-week basis would be nice.
Yeah, I got to start somewhere, I suppose. You mentioned how he's kind of known for like who he hires, and the way I saw it was like, okay, they hired Harbaugh, and I was like, well, we at least got to see what the coordinators look like. And it was like, okay, if he's able to get like Todd Monken and like Anthony Weaver or something like that, you're like, okay, well, you get the floor raising and some really exciting coordinators. They end up with Nagy and
Denard Wilson from Tennessee. Yeah.
So, yeah, what was your reaction to that? I suppose
I'm not thrilled about Nagy. Now, it'd be fun to go back and be like, oh man, this guy used to be coach of the year. That's something, I guess. But I mean, I saw what happened with Kansas City and his impact there, and that's not exactly encouraging. But the Chiefs were trending in that direction anyway. And I mean, I've talked about it a ton on my channel. I'm sure you have as well. But with the constant too high shells you're rolling out there, teams are, especially against Kansas City, are like zero explosive. We're going to force you to run the ball. And they didn't have a running game. So I think the Giants' run game should be better than what Kansas City's had. They have just more talent in the running back room, even though it's not absolutely elite. Scatterboo when healthy is a good player. I think Tyrone Tracy's a nice compliment. And their offensive line is kind of built towards run blocking now, especially with drafting Francis CC Maui Noah. So I think the Giants' running game should be pretty good. And will that open up the opportunity for more explosives? And you factor in what Dart can do as a runner. I think if I delude myself, I can tell you, I think the Giants might have a pretty good running attack and maybe a better offense under Nagy. And sometimes you do see these reclamation projects where it's like, not excited about this. And then the right type of pieces come together in the right situation. You're like, this guy used to be coach of the year. How is he not getting more hype? It's like, well, it's Matt Nagy. But I think there's a way it works out. I wouldn't be shocked if it doesn't. But I mean,
you got Greg Roman in there too. Greg Roman is.
I wouldn't have hated Greg Roman, honestly. I think he's been overhated.
Yeah. Well, he's in there. He's like an assistant.
But he's not. I don't know what his authority is going to be.
Gotcha.
He's not the OC the way he was with like LA and Baltimore. And I recognize he keeps getting fired, but
absolutely. Do you have any thoughts on Denard Wilson at all, or just like?
It's tough because like you go back and you see Tennessee, and it's like the only thing that pops is Jeffrey Simmons, and then that's just individual greatness. And then they didn't have talent. So it's like, what do you take away? I think the Giants on paper have a lot more talent than Tennessee's defense did. Now, the Giants were like one of the worst defenses in the league last year, but it's hard to say, okay, Denard Wilson comes in. It's going to be a similar type of defense, but is it going to be more effective with more talent? It's hard to say. And that's why I always hesitate to grade any type of coaching hire, because you just don't know. You don't know what it's going to be like. You can, take the best coach in the world, like, oh, Bill Belichick's going to UNC, most accomplished head coach ever, and then it's like an absolute disaster. I mean, that's one example, and I guess you probably could have seen that coming, but, it's a lot of a waiting game.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little Jackson Dart. Obviously, you're in the weeds doing a lot of draft prep and stuff, and then you get year one from Dart. I'm curious what your kind of impressions were, and just kind of your post year one scouting report. I guess, what are you looking at, strengths and weaknesses from what you saw there? What maybe he has to improve on?
I was really pleasantly surprised because I was not high on Jackson Dart as a prospect. I saw so many not only mechanical issues but just awful decision making in critical moments, and I thought that really improved. Yeah, that's a big one. I thought that really improved with the Giants. And for a rookie quarterback to kind of look so poised, it's almost like he rose to the occasion and rose to the moment in the spotlight. And I thought he played quite well. Like, everyone's expectations for a young quarterback now are so much higher, maybe doubly or triply more insane than what they used to be even 10 years ago. Now there's no leash. I mean, you look at it with JJ McCarthy and the Vikings, he doesn't get a rookie year. He plays his rookie year as a second year player and isn't amazing. And then it's suddenly, well, like, Vikings need a new quarterback. It's like, well, if you thought that, why did you even draft him if there were no developable skills, if the framework wasn't good enough? And I think Dart, to me, is somebody that I had low expectations for year one, and I was really happy with how he played. I thought his general accuracy was pretty good. He kind of does the Cam Ward thing a little bit, where he's not afraid to take some of these risks. And we know over a career and over more reps, those are going to go different ways. Like, you're not always going to be able to complete the unbelievable throw. I mean, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, as you saw, kind of made a career out of doing that, where it's like, how did he do it? It's like some of those go the wrong way. Then you get, Brett Favre. And if you don't make enough plays to make up for the bad plays, you're in trouble as a team. And I think Dart just needs to probably play slightly more conservatively at times. And that also matters as a runner. Oh my goodness, this guy does not know how to keep his body safe. And that's kind of my biggest concern with him. You want to talk about weaknesses? You can talk about some obvious things with a young quarterback where they need to grow as a decision maker, as a processor, but man, he needs to take care of his body, because he's no use to anybody when he's on the sideline. And it's like constant, I don't want to see my quarterback ever lowering the shoulder unless you're Cam Newton, slide or get out of bounds. And he needs to do that a lot more. But I was really happy with how he played as a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just kind of diving into some of his film, getting ready for this, like, you nailed it. Like, you got to find that right balance with the aggressiveness. I think like my quarterback, Jordan Love, is like the perfect example of that. You want the guy that's willing to test those tight windows, find these crazy windows that a lot of quarterbacks wouldn't even see. And you saw some of those throws from Dart last year. It's like, why? How did he even think to do that? But that was really smart. But yeah, you gotta find the right balance. You're not always putting the ball in harm's way. So that's well said. One more Dart question. And this is kind of putting you on the spot here, but what's your 1 to 10 confidence level that he's going to be a franchise quarterback? And the way I want to define that is, let's say that he's a top 16 QB by the end of the 2027 season. What's your confidence level?
I'm going to answer this in two ways, because to me, franchise quarterback is guy that you are not actively considering replacing in any way. And I think that's probably closer to a top 10, because a guy like Daniel Jones, the Giants thought was a top 16 quarterback, and he played decently enough for a season, playing as conservatively as possible, and then got that big extension. He was a fringe top 16 or 20 quarterback. I wasn't especially high on him, but he was just good enough to where you're like, okay, we can probably win with this guy. And to me, I think Dart, like, for sure can be that. The odds of him getting more into the top 12 type of a range, where there's actually no consideration replacing him, I would say maybe a 6. It's so tough, because let's say he has a sophomore year coming up and he doesn't play especially well, and you look at the receivers, huge question mark with Neighbors. Like, is Odell suddenly wide receiver 1? You have Odell, Darnell Mooney, and we don't even know if Odell is going to make the team, but I kind of expect that he will. But Darnell Mooney, I was looking at a tweet that was talking about the Giants wide receiver locks, and Calvin Austin was in the conversation. That's kind of where things are. If Calvin Austin's a lock to make the roster, I don't know anything. Like, he might, but Calvin Austin's not necessarily a big needle mover. I don't know how you feel about him, but the receiver room's not great. Like, you go out, you trade up for Malachi. That's like a lot of draft capital to give up for a guy who doesn't necessarily get open at an elite level. I think the jump.
What did they end up giving up for him?
It was quite a bit. I don't have the details in front of me, but it was obviously like their third plus a fifth plus something else.
Okay. Maybe not quite like Isaac Tesla territory, but
It was, um, let's
it can
see
be hard to
here,
find those.
105, 145, and a 2027 4. So
Yeah.
not a third. It was 105, 145, and a fourth next year. So it was
Sure.
quite a lot to move up into the third round, for a guy that, like, I mean, is maybe Kenny Galladay. Like, that's like his, like, prime Kenny Galladay was pretty good, but he
Yeah.
still had the same problems that ended up not aging well at all with the
Sure.
Giants.
Sure.
So we have to look at, like, how that happens.
Mhm.
It's so tough because when it does work out, these guys that can't get open in the NFL, okay, they're physical enough to make it work. That's the outlier. I think a lot of people don't get that. Then you get the guys like N'Keal Harry, who, like,
Right.
simply have no ability at all. And then
Mhm.
maybe we're gonna start having the conversation with Marvin Harrison pretty soon. Not
Mm.
to the same level, maybe, but he's
Yeah.
another guy where these TikTok routes that worked in college don't necessarily work consistently in the NFL when you have less than 3 seconds to get the ball out.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good tie into some of these other questions I had for you. How close have you been? I would imagine pretty closely tracking Neighbors' like recovery. There was the big clip at the softball game like a week ago that everyone was freaking out about. I guess he just had surgery again, like what, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So how worried are you at this point for his 2026 outlook and even beyond that?
It depends what happens, right? Like, I think the Giants need to realize that they're not necessarily 4 games of Malik Neighbors away from being a contender. Like,
Mhm.
just sit this guy for as long as it takes for him to get to 100%. There's absolutely no reason to rush him at all. So if you can just tread water for the first few weeks, if that's what it takes, the Neighbors does not need to play week 1. Yeah,
Mhm.
it seems like the goal. But he tore his ACL what, week 3 last year,
Yeah.
something around that. So it's like, again, our expectations are so much higher. You tear your ACL 10 years ago, we don't expect to see you unless you're Adrian Peterson for a year, maybe even a
Yeah.
little bit longer than that. Now it's okay.
9
12
months.
months goes by, and it's like, how are you not on the field? 8
Yeah.
months goes by, and you're like, you should be practicing at least.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a little bit worried about it because the things that I'm hearing are not exceptional.
Yeah.
But I think if the Giants play this smart, it should be okay. But who knows how good he's going to be? Like,
Right.
not everybody recovers from these type of injuries the same way. And then we're talking about, man, what a rookie season, and that's just all it ever was. Which I hope is not the case, obviously, but
Yeah, that'd be
it's a
brutal.
possibility. The people that
Yeah.
deny that as a possibility are lying to themselves.
Yeah,
Which
I'm
I
going
want to
through
be
this.
that as well.
I'm going through the same denial with Micah Parsons, where it's like I really hope he's back 100%, but you never know, like you said. So hopefully,
Especially for a guy whose first step has been a huge part of
right?
his success.
Yeah, both guys. It's like athleticism is just off the charts, elite. Um, so other than Neighbors, whether he's healthy or not, you hinted at this group a little bit, but I got to get your pick on who you think leads this team in receiving yards, other than Neighbors. And it could be one of the backs or tight ends too.
I was going to say, I think non-zero chance it's Isaiah Likely, because I don't
Yeah.
expect the Giants to play him as, the classic inline tight end. I think they're going to
Mhm.
move him around a little bit, and there's a chance he's getting, 6 to 10, 12 targets a game maybe. And then you'd expect him to, certainly, especially at what they're paying him, like, you're
Yeah.
expecting him to produce. He needs to. Outside of that, I guess, like, Slayton's a safe call because he's already, like, he's doing like 600 yards a year or something like that. And
Yeah.
that could lead the Giants.
You're the
in
first person
receiving.
to ever say Slayton is a safe call, I think, in
Well,
in
I
the history.
I didn't like the extension.
Yeah.
Everyone, if the first thing that somebody's saying about a player is that they're a great locker room leader, it's because there's not enough to talk about on
Right.
the field. I hate to
Right.
say it, but that's the case. Slayton drops the ball consistently. I don't
Mhm.
think he offers anything in the intermediate or short areas of the field. It's purely a deep threat that needs to catch his deep opportunities to have an impact, and he doesn't do that consistently enough. He never has. But
Yeah.
He will
over the
catch a
course
few
of
of
a
them.
season, he's safe. It's just, week
Yeah,
to
yeah.
week, you just have no idea what you're going to get.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm looking at his over the last 4 years, 724, 770, 573, 538. Like, could that
Yeah.
lead the Giants in receiving in 2026? It's not impossible if Neighbors
Yeah.
is not around.
Yep. It sounds like you're not overly optimistic on Fields either. You don't need to go back down that path, but maybe wasn't your favorite prospect.
I think where they got him was pretty good. I really would have preferred Ted Hurst because I think the
Mm,
upside's so significantly higher.
yeah.
But and he was available when they made that move is why I'm mentioning him. I think Fields could end up being very good, but again, it's like if he doesn't catch his contested catch opportunities, which can vary a lot, especially with the jump up to the NFL, these DBs find the ball maybe twice as often as what they're going to do in college. So
Yeah.
if you can have a DB that actually can get their hands through your hands at the catch point, you're going to have a tougher time, converting a lot of those opportunities. So if he can't get open, which if I have questions about it in college, I don't want to even know what it looks like in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
So I think he could be in the conversation. We saw him stack some DBs at the Senior Bowl, even though he's not exactly a burner. I think he does classify as a deep threat. So, and we never, like, what if he evolves, right? So I think Fields is maybe in the conversation, but as a rookie, I wouldn't say he's a safe bet.
Yeah.
We don't even know where he is on the depth chart right now, for sure.
Yeah.
We can see what they're putting out there as in like training camp and OTAs, but it's not. It doesn't really tell us much until the actual season gets here. I've seen so many rookies that practice with the ones, and then the season comes around and they're a healthy scratch. So we'll see.
Absolutely. So what about the top two picks there? What was your reaction there? Did you like both Reese and Maui Noah as prospects?
I was ecstatic about Reese. Love him as a player. Loved him as a linebacker prospect. So the fact that the Giants are going to be playing him at linebacker makes me really, really excited, really happy. I was as happy with the Arvell Reese pick as I was in a long time. I was really happy about Neighbors and Thibodeau and Neal even at the time. It was horrendous. I thought they crushed it, but I was really happy about Reese. I was happy about Maui Noah because I see the vision, but also like number 10 overall for a guard is just high. It is. So I like the player. I thought he could stick at right tackle. Obviously, now he's not going to get that opportunity until maybe a few years down the line. Illuminor is a 3-year contract that I think can kind of turn into 2. So maybe they kick him out to right tackle. But how many times have we said that about a player and then they just stick at guard and the team just looks for another tackle when the time comes? But I was pleased because I think he's a good player. I think he's going to help the Giants run the ball like we talked about a bit earlier. And I thought he was in the conversation for best overall offensive lineman in the draft. Kind of depend what you want. Like, I guess Maui Noah would be like your more traditional gap scheme type offensive lineman in general, where Fano's obviously like the zone mover.
Sure.
So I think that kind of tells you what the Giants want to do schematically this year a little bit when they plug him in. But also like at guard instead of tackle, he's scheme versatile, I would say. So I don't think his movement skills are elite. I think Fano truly had elite movement skills, but you don't get the power with Fano that you got with Maui Noah. So I think Maui Noah is probably, I hesitate to say this, but I think he's probably the safest offensive lineman in the draft. I think he will be a good starter. And I was, probably like a 10 out of 10 on Reese because I just think he's got that level of upside and talent. And also Thibodeau expiring contract. Brian Burns, I know your favorite, a potential cap casualty in a couple of years. But I think his value beyond, advanced metrics is also what he does to an offensive line group in general. Like the threaten with the speed, I think is really valuable because if you can get that tackle in their drop step, like setting up a little bit deeper, it creates some more opportunities on the interior. And the Giants really lack there, but maybe like Darius Alexander has a big year or two or something. He's only like 30 years old now. God. No, but I do like him as a player. We'll see what happens. But their interior defensive line is like, it's probably the worst in the league, I would say.
I don't think it's crazy. I mean, you're counting on 2 very old players to stay healthy there. Yeah.
Yep. And there's
Yep.
already been a big injury.
Yeah, to
So,
Robertson Harris. Yeah.
yeah. And that, I
Yep.
mean, he was going to be a starter. It was like, oh
Yeah,
man, I
when you're
can't believe we have
calling Roy Robertson
Robertson
Harris,
Harris.
so when you're calling that a big injury and you're correct, like that shows you exactly where you're at.
Yeah. And then how old is Shelby Harris now? 34?
35.
Maybe?
He turns 30. I think
35.
I was just looking at it. I think he turns 35 in July, I think is what it was, if my memory serves me right there.
I like the idea of DJ Reader, though. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the best guy the Giants possibly could have got outside of like Caden McDonald, who they didn't really get the opportunity to. Texans jump them, which they apparently were not going to draft anyway. This was a tough draft for the Giants because they had so many different needs.
Yeah.
Like losing Flott was actually huge. So they kind of needed to go out and get a corner. And I like Colton Hood. I thought that was good value.
Yeah, he'll be interesting. I felt like he's such a project in terms of zone because he didn't really do anything other than just follow guys up and down the sideline. And it should be a pretty zone heavy team, but coaches always say, it's, give me the guy that can run man and then we'll teach him zone. So hopefully they got the right coaches to do that. All right. What was your favorite pick beyond the second round was how I wrote this question down.
For the Giants in particular?
Yeah. For the Giants, third round and beyond.
Okay, so they got Malachi Fields in the third, Bobby Jamison Travis out of Auburn, who I did not even notice when watching Keldrick Falk, or who's the other edge?
At Auburn. Oh, Crawford.
Yeah, Kieron Crawford. They got JC Davis, who I watched post-draft, and I thought actually looked pretty good. I'm curious where the Giants are going to play him, but probably Jack Kelly because he's kind of stood out. He's a team captain, decent athlete. And you're looking at day 3, you're looking at guys that can make a special teams type of impact. Yeah. And if they have to play, like I don't know that Micah McFadden's going to be the Giants after this year. So maybe Jack Kelly could be that rotational type of guy. So
I think I actually had Micah McFadden as my pro comp on Jack Kelly, which was fun.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So,
I like JC Davis a lot. I watched him kind of late, but I ended up he was pushing top 10 for, I think I had him still as a tackle, but I liked him as a guard potential, but reminded me a little bit of like Belton, who the Packers took in the second round year before. Really strong.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just big, strong guy that might slide inside. So keep an eye on him, I guess. All right. Last question here for you is Javon Holland. What is going on with him? Because he had a down year in Miami. I was surprised he didn't get more money in free agency. There was a handful of other safeties that got more than him. And then felt like he wasn't much of a factor for the Giants. I'm curious if just kind of glued to Giants games all year, if you saw anything you liked from Holland or where you're at with him just kind of as a player and his future with the team.
So it's kind of tough because, I think about Javon Holland. I think about like young star DB. And I mean, I loved him as a prospect coming out of Oregon. I was really, really high on him. And so I was really excited to see him play well with Miami. And then you talked about the down year. Giants picked him up. I just think it's one of those things where if the defense is so bad in general, it is tough for a safety to stand out. And he made a couple of plays, but the Giants as a whole did not cover well in general. They honestly, I think when you defend the run as poorly as the Giants did, it's like you don't give these teams a reason to try and test you down the field. And I think that's where Holland has historically stood out. I think he's got such exceptional range, or at least has in the past. I think playing with better players around him could make him look better. I'm not really a big Tyler Nubin guy. I think he's so limited. And I think Holland would obviously benefit from playing alongside somebody that was a little bit rangier as well, a little bit better. The Giants aren't a team that, and a lot of teams in the NFL now, don't run a lot of single highs. So you don't really get to show off if you have that type of skill set. And I think Holland has shown that before, that he can be that player. But also, you talk about turnovers in the NFL. It's such a fluky thing at times. You need quarterbacks to make mistakes in your area, and then you need to convert on the opportunities. You look at like a guy like Kevin Byard, led the league in interceptions like 10 years ago. And then oh, Kevin Byard fell off so bad, and then suddenly Kevin Byard's all pro that led the league in interceptions again.
Yeah.
So safety, I think year to year is one of these weird positions. I'd like to think that Javon Holland could still play to his contract. I don't know that it's going to be this year because I don't know that the situation is very much improved. But, if he comes out and has, 5 picks, it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, that's not the standalone metric about what makes a safety good. But it's one of these tough positions because you only really notice them when they're making a mistake half the time. Or like Caleb Downs or Kyle Hamilton where they play near the line and are constantly making plays near the line of scrimmage. That's not really historically Javon Holland's game, even though I think he did probably post a big tackle season his third year in Miami.
Yeah. They could do that, but like Drew Phillips is such a slot-oriented player, I feel like, that it wouldn't really make sense.
Drew Phillips.
Oh, you got Drew Phillips thoughts? I'd like to hear them.
Oh, man, he's grabbing down the field constantly. It's like he also is, again, slot limited, so I don't know what your true value is. I don't think he's a great athlete. I think he tackles well for a corner.
Okay, all right. I'm a little higher on him, but that's all right. That's all right.
The thing is, when you're like giving away yardage with penalties,
yeah,
it's like, why let him make a play?
Yeah,
like he
doesn't get it
anyway. I wish I want to see his head around
at all.
No, none of the Giants DBs find the ball. I'm sorry, we're not going to get crazy here, but like, oh my god, especially like Deontay Banks. Oh my god,
yeah, he's bad.
That's a guy who doesn't even know that there is a football.
He has changed how much I value that as a trait with cornerbacks. Like the last couple of years, it's like if I really like you, but you don't get your head around to find the ball, I'm probably dinging you like a round.
Yeah.
All right. I do want to. You hinted at it earlier, but I've been doing this for all my guests, just asking the teams over under for the year, and I'm going to track the record for all of our guests to see how well they did. And the Giants over under really surprises me. It's 7.5 on the year.
It's too high. It should be 6.5, and I would take the over at 7, but I don't want to take the under at 7.5.
It's a tough one. Schedule's a little easier. You get Tennessee,
Slightly.
Arizona,
New
Orleans,
a fairly
Cleveland
tough division.
Yep.
I almost would exclusively take the under. I'm gonna be positive this year.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna say they get
right.
8.
Get to 8. Okay. All right. We'll put it on the record. We'll see how they do.
We'll see.
This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for the time. What do you got going on throughout the summer here, getting ready for the season that people can check out?
That's a good question. I'm doing Cardinals franchise on my second channel. That's been fun for the baseball Cardinals. And I think I might do NFL head coach 09 to stick with some more video game content on the main channel, and then like various quizzes and things. So
I'm going to have to check that out because I never actually played NFL head coach 09, which is like a sin to be in my position and say that.
It's involved. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
Cool. Very cool.
Who knows? Maybe Madden 27 will have a lot going on.
Maybe. Here's hoping. So a huge thanks to Bengal. Always great to get his thoughts on this Giants team. But he took the over on this Giants team at 7.5 wins. Let's take a look at their schedule officially here and see what I think. So it's a modest schedule. I think, they have 4 winnable home games for sure, like very winnable home games where they should be favorites in Tennessee, Arizona, New Orleans, and Cleveland. However, besides that, it's a lot of playoff teams from last year and teams that are hoping to be in the playoffs this year, and Washington in their division, which is, NFC East division games are always interesting. But it's a okay schedule. I would say I wouldn't describe this as overly easy, overly hard. It's ultimately going to come down to the Giants hitting all these green lights we've been talking about on whether or not they can achieve a
very, very aggressive over-under of 7.5 wins. That stunned me. I'm going to be honest. And call me the Giants hater. I'll eat my words if I'm wrong. That's got to be my favorite over-under bet of the year. Like, I don't predict the Giants win 8 games. I predict they win 5. And even their floor and ceiling, like, okay, I talked about there's some upside here. If everything goes dramatically right, and especially with Jackson Dart, like, okay, they could be a fringe wild card team. I still said 9 wins for the ceiling, like maybe a 2% dream world scenario, 10. I think their floor is pretty low. Like, there's a lot of risk attached to this team. Also, like, your offense, you have quarterback, running back, superstar wide receiver, and franchise left tackle all have questions about durability. So if 2 of those 4 or 3 of those 4 or all 4 get hurt, yeah, your floor is pretty damn low just by that context alone. So I had the floor at 4 wins, and maybe that's too high. But like, dude, I'm sorry. Like, 7.5 wins is giving John Harbaugh way too much credit. I think this is a 5.5 win team that is getting a 2-win John Harbaugh tax that is probably unjustified to begin with. I said 5 wins. I would bet the under, and I will be betting the under on this team. I'm sorry. It's nothing against the Giants. There's been plenty of years where I'm too high on the Giants. This is a year where I'm low on this Giants team because they're actually, in terms of Super Bowl odds, which is kind of the consensus power rankings, if you will, they're 22nd to 24th, which is, I've got them 27th. So I'm a few spots lower on the Giants. And certainly with that over-under, I would be very surprised if this is an 8 or a 9-win team this year. That doesn't mean they can't hit some of these green lights, though, and still leave you excited for future seasons. Like, could this team still win 7 games? You still go under on that over-under. But if Jackson Dart looks good and Malik Neighbors looks healthy and the O-line's taking a step and some things are coming together on defense by the end of the year, that's like still a reasonable, great outcome for this team. I just cannot, for the life of me, understand why their over-under is so high. And it's not like the schedule is particularly easy, which if you want to compare teams to the Patriots last year, at least we said in their deep dive last year, like, they do have this incredibly easy schedule, and it played out that way. I don't really think the same way with this. So, yeah, I'm going under for the betting folks. I really think that's probably my favorite over-under for the year, unless we see something else as we go here. But let's conclude with these team superlative awards, beginning with team MVP. And for both this and the biggest wild card, I don't do quarterback just because that's kind of the easy pick for most of these teams. Want to be more fascinating than that. But I went with Abdul Carter for team MVP with how I waxed poetic about him and with how I do think Malik Neighbors probably gets eased into the season as well. I got to go with Carter, taking that next leap, really breaking through. Kind of like I see his path kind of like Will Anderson, where he had a good rookie year. They actually talked about it because the Texans were a playoff team that year. But pretty similar, I think, if you went and compared the numbers. Would be fun to go back and do that. But, you know, Will Anderson took another leap in year 2, and then by year 3, the dude's, $50 million defensive player of the year type of guy. Could absolutely see that for him. And on this team, a year 2 Will Anderson year, I think that's a team MVP. Biggest wild card, again, non-quarterback, Malik Neighbors. We broke that down, how important he is for the rest of the cards falling correctly in terms of how those skill sets line up. Like, it all centers around having Malik Neighbors, let alone just how good of a player he is and what the impact he could make for Jackson Dart's development. Like, even if I was considering quarterbacks, I would still maybe include Neighbors because I think Neighbors is super important for how good Jackson Dart is. Like, it is so critical that he's able to get back there, stay healthy, and be the same guy. And if I'm a Giants fan, forget about playoff dreams, over under, forget about everything on this team. The number one thing that I need to come out of this year is feeling that Jackson Dart is our guy and that Malik Neighbors is good to go for 2027 and beyond, and that he got back and showed that he is that guy. Everything else is cherry on top at that point. So Malik Neighbors was the choice there, almost in tandem with Jackson Dart. But to piggyback off of that, breakout offense, I do have Jackson Dart here. Number one, I didn't have a lot of great choices there for breakout offense. Maybe Cam Scattaboo. But I feel like Scattaboo kind of already broke out. Like, I think everybody realizes how good Scattaboo is. It's just we recognize he got hurt. I'm gonna choose to be optimistic with Jackson Dart. Maybe it's me wanting to end things on a positive note with this Giants team because I've had some anti-Giants takes over the last, this video in the last couple months. But like, I just will reiterate the point I said earlier. When I dove into the film to like really solidify my opinion on Dart, I ended up feeling more optimistic than I thought I would. And he's got to clean some stuff up, but there really is a lot to like, not just the playmaking stuff. Like, there's some really high-end processing, decision-making stuff that you're like, okay, like, there's a cerebral quarterback in there behind all of the chaotic YOLO plays that you want to see, not eliminated entirely, but refined and cleaned up a little bit. Breakout defense, Abdul Carter, like, don't need to rehash points there, but he was my choice for breakout player on the defensive side of things. Best rookie, tough choice, considering the amount of rookies that are going to be playing here. I did go with Francis Maui-Noah. Reese was certainly in consideration. I think both guys are going to be great. I think Reese could end up with like a 12-sack season because like your sack conversion rate when you're a blitzing linebacker is really high, and he's so good at it. Like, I think the public perception could be Reese is the best rookie, but I'm also just like really optimistic about Francis Maui-Noah, and if he's a top 15 guard, and there's reason to believe he's going to be a top 5 to 8 guard within a year or two, like, that's also incredible too. Like, I really struggled with who to pick there. I love both those players as picks for this team. I think Reese probably, like, at the end of the day, Reese probably has more bad tape out there than Maui-Noah will have, just because linebacker as a rookie is really hard, especially for a guy that's only half linebacker. But yeah, tough choice there for best rookie. And then fantasy MVP, I did go Cam Scattaboo. Now, we're looking at like ADP and value here. He is still RB19, which is especially fascinating because I had the Giants ranked 19th for run games. So, that's par for the course for like how I ranked the offense overall, but that's also encouraging because I think, we're ranking these teams at their floor as we head into the season. They could certainly finish higher than that. Part of that is injury concerns on Cam Scattaboo. I'm going to take the optimistic outlook here. Like, if Cam Scattaboo can stay healthy, I think he's probably closer to RB10 in fantasy than 19. So he was my choice for fantasy MVP. Jackson Dart also could be considered there. If he has a breakout year, he's not going to be getting drafted terribly high, but the running backs can really change those fantasy seasons for you. So I'm gonna probably end up with a decent share of Cam Scattaboo for my redraft leagues. But that's going to do it for our Giants deep dive here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please do hit that like button if you haven't yet. It really does help out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this ranking, where you agree, disagree, not just with the ranking, but always fun to see some like further context. There's always little tidbits of information, injuries here, different offseason news and notes that can go unseen from me putting together a 32-team summer deep dive series. So if you got anything to add, let me know in the comments down below. Also, who do you think comes next with the 26th spot in these power rankings? We're starting to get into some interesting territory here, which is fun. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers.